Welcome to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid. A set of conversations about our government, our politics, and the kind of country we aspire to be. And now, here's your host, Edwin Eisendrath, on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hello, everybody. Happy Saturday. For those of you mathematically inclined, happy Pi Day. For those of us in Chicago, this is the day in advance of St. Patrick's Day when we dye our river an absolutely gorgeous green. So life goes on, right? There's the last games being played to determine the brackets for the NCAA, and life goes on. And yet, as long as Donald Trump is in the White House, this beautiful country of ours is really just a lawless monster loose upon the world. In his first weeks, Mr. Trump destroyed USAID. According to the Center for Global Development, that puts us on track for 1.5 million preventable deaths a year. Closer to home, researchers at Yale and Penn found that the healthcare cuts in his big, beautiful bill will result in 42,000 preventable American deaths a year. Trump called climate change a hoax and ended all regulation for greenhouse gases. According to the National Climate Assessment, 1,300 Americans die of heat exposure in the U.S. every year already, and globally, climate change is estimated to cause millions of preventable deaths. That's Donald Trump. And I guess you could say not preventing death is one thing, and actual killing is another. So let's look at that. Take Trump's mass deportation drive. In 2025, at least 32 people died in ICE custody. The American Prospect tracks the number of people killed by immigration agents in America. That's important because ICE doesn't tell us. And between January and November, they've confirmed 28 killings. And of course, we all saw the murders of Renee Good and Alex Preddy at their hands. Killings. On our streets, in the courts, even in Congress, Americans rebelled against Trump's attack on our cities, this violent attack against us. And it became a political liability for him. So he thought, well, let's just do this overseas. You know, he focused elsewhere. He launched attacks on small boats, first in the Caribbean and then in the Pacific. The New York Times confirmed 157 killed in 45 strikes between September 2nd and March 8th. One of those strikes, as you know, was ordered to kill two men clinging to the remains of a boat that had already been destroyed by one of our missiles. At least 40 people were killed in that action in Venezuela, that full-fledged military operation that Secretary of State Marco Rubio described as an effort to assist law enforcement in capturing a criminal. Please. Trump has ordered our military into action in, Venezuela, Yemen, Somalia, Nigeria, Syria, Iraq, and of course, Iran. And in 2 weeks of war with Iran, we've killed about 1,300 people and injured about 10,000 civilians. An American Tomahawk missile destroyed a school, killing 175 schoolgirls. Can you imagine? Trump says we've won the war. He also says he doesn't know how long the war will last. And 2 nights ago he wrote, and let me just read it. Watch what happens to these deranged scumbags today. They will be killing, they've been killing innocent people all over the world for 47 years, and now I, as the 47th President of the United States of America, am killing them. What a great honor it is to do so. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Plenty of scholars believe the U.S. is engaged in illegal warfare and committed war crimes. This is us. Over in the Department of Defense, now called War, Pete Hegseth says, we will offer no quarter, which means we will kill soldiers who surrender rather than take prisoners. And that is, of course, a war crime, just like killing people floating in the ocean clinging to a boat. War crime. And it made me wonder, How many prisoners of war do you think we took in Venezuela, in Nigeria, in Syria, and everywhere we fought during this past year? Did we take any? When the combatants laid down their arms to surrender, as surely they did, faced with our overwhelming power, what happened? Did we just kill them? War crimes. Us. Sickening. Donald Trump gave his lengthy State of the Union address. All of America that's the time to talk to us. It was just days before he attacked Iran, but he couldn't be bothered to tell us that what he's thinking. He couldn't be bothered in that moment to make a case for war. And since then, he's offered at least 10 different rationales. How can you win when you don't know what you're fighting for? For Mr. Trump and Mr. Hegseth, I'm afraid the answer is killing is an end in itself. We are winning as long as we are killing. And as Hegseth says, we can do it because we've gotten rid of these stupid rules of engagement, otherwise known as laws. And they tell us Cuba is next. This is the United States. This is us. We are better than that. Monsters. And what does all of this tell us? What do they think the world looks like when the killing stops? Literally, they haven't thought about it, not for a second. I'm sorry, that is not quite true. I apologize. We have an example where Trump has thought about it. He told the world he would rebuild Gaza. His plan offered bounties for those who survived the fighting there to leave, and incentives for developers to build fancy hotels. That's his idea of what peace looks like, but nothing has come of it because his idea isn't thought through, as bad as it is. Hamas is still armed. Israel is still engaged there militarily. Apparently, Mr. Trump's idea of peace is just a quieter war. And so this week, this terrible man lifted sanctions on Russian oil. He did so over the objections of our European allies. They actually need the oil. But look, they would rather do without than enrich this tyrant whose army is attacking their continent from the east through Ukraine. Mr. Trump doesn't care about the dead in Ukraine. He doesn't care about the country of Ukraine. He doesn't care about freedom and democracy in Europe. He doesn't care about national borders. He doesn't care about international law. And by the way, casualties in that Ukraine war are now nearly 2 million. Not dead, but casualties. Nearly 2 million. Trump is coming to Congress now to ask for more money to pay for his wars. And let me just remind you that he asked and he received a $150 billion increase to the defense appropriation in his big, beautiful bill while he was cutting health care for Americans and giving tax cuts to the wealthy. And that extra $150 billion, it brought the annual Defense Department spending to $1 trillion. $1 trillion a year. And he wants more? This year, Pete Hegseth spent $9 million on crab legs and lobster. He spent $15 million on ribeye steaks. He even spent $90,000 on a grand piano for the home of the Air Force Chief of Staff. And they want more money. Look, this waste, I know, it's a drop in the bucket when the bucket holds $1 trillion. But the image of our military leadership dining on pricey Alaskan king crab legs while tearing up any restraints to their lethality and drawing up target lists that are disconnected from any objectives, wow, that is not something Americans should be proud of. No one. Absolutely no one is safe while Donald Trump and his gang are in power. Thank goodness we have elections, and we are winning them every time we have them, and we will win them in bigger and bigger numbers. This midterm cannot come fast enough. All right, I have a fabulous show for you today. Some of it I recorded yesterday, including conversations coming up after the break with Tamar Jacoby, who is stationed and has been working in Ukraine. We're going to talk about that because, please, God, we should not forget what's going on there. A great show. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
All right, everybody. I am thrilled to be joined again by the distinguished journalist and author, Tamara Jacoby. She is now the Kiev-based director of the Progressive Policy Institute's New Ukraine project, and she's been kind enough to make time to join us a few times now to talk about that war, that country, and what's going on in Europe. So welcome back.
Nice to be here, Edwin.
Can we just start with, like, where are we in the war?
It's a fraught topic.
Right.
We've had the 4th anniversary. So, in Iran, we're going into we're at 2 weeks. Here we're at 4 years plus. A lot has changed in some ways, and a lot has not changed that much. The front line has hardly moved in about 2 years. The technology has developed just revolutionary technology compared to what the war looked like in 2022 compared to what the war looks like now and sounds like and how it kills people. That's all dramatically different. People in Kyiv and elsewhere are tired, but they are not giving up. It's an existential war for them. If they give up, that's the end of their country. And it's the end, and as they see it, and I don't think it's an exaggeration, it's basically enslavement. They go back to being ruled by the country that dominated them for 300 years, and they didn't like it much. And they don't think much of that way of life. They don't want the central government controlling everything, and they don't want to be cut off from the West. They're very democratic. They're very Western looking, and so they're fighting for their very lives, the life of the nation. And Russia's pursuing a crazy monomaniacal dream of an expanded empire that it seems unable or unwilling to give up. So they are kind of locked in the struggle. As I say, the front line does not move that much. So a lot of people die. I think the Russian death count is now at 1.3. It's not death, it's casualties, but it's 1.3 million. Ukrainian death count is much, much lower because they're much more careful with men, and maybe half or something, or maybe, I don't know, maybe less. But it's a lot of we're again, compare Iran. I think we're up to 7 or something Americans, and that seems like a lot, or 3, I don't know. Here again, Russia's talking 1.3 million that are seriously wounded. So the war goes on. I don't see a sign, I'm trying to summarize. I don't see a sign of ending anytime soon. Trump, I'm sure you want to talk more about this, but Trump has been trying to force a peace on what Ukrainians see as very unfair terms. And both Ukraine and Russia have gone along.
Back up 1 second. Okay. The reason why I asked you for an update on the war is because it's fallen off the news in the United States. I mean, here you have, as you say, 1.3 million casualties on the other side, but even if it's a third of that, you're approaching 2 million casualties in this war. I don't want to make light of 100,000-ish casualties in Gaza, but that got all of America's attention, and 7 casualties in Iran, not in Iran, but in this Iran war, gets all of America's attention. And what's going on in the biggest war in Europe in 80 years gets almost no attention here.
Well, it's not only Ukraine, it's really Europe's war.
That's right.
If Russia wins this war, they will be expanding further into Europe in a matter of years. So, and I think, what's the explanation in America? I don't know. I think people they think it's more of the same. They think it's sort of same old, same old. They think, well, nothing is really moving and a lot of people are dying and that's all I need to know. And, they have drones. I mean, that's sort of, that's the 20-word summary. And I mean, I experience it when I go home, and this is partly a joke, but I used to be able to dine out on talking about what it was like in Ukraine. Now, even my close friends who should care about my safety sort of say, well, how is it? And I have about 30 seconds to answer. And after that, they're tired of hearing about it.
I don't
And you can
understand.
just see it in their body language.
So this is Europe's war, as you point out. Europe sees expansionist Russia as a as a true threat to them, to their freedom. Um, so what was the reaction first in Ukraine and then the rest of Europe when the United States opened a Western front in Europe by pretending it was going to invade Greenland and forcing troop movements across Europe from their eastern front to their western front?
Yeah, there's no describing or there's no overestimating, maybe is the way to put it, the European reaction. I mean, people had the way I put it was that before the Greenland episode, there were everybody saw that there was going to be change, that the U.S. was pivoting, and there were sort of three groups of leaders. They were kind of the deniers who just wanted to say everything's going to be fine, let's keep going as we are, partly because they thought if they acknowledged the problem, they would be precipitating it, right? So they're the deniers. And then there was a handful of young people over on the edge who said, NATO's dead, come on, acknowledge it, get on with our lives, we've got to start to plan an alternative. But most people were sort of in the middle. And Greenland really woke everybody up. There's now only a handful of deniers. Everybody else sees the U.S. is unreliable. The last 80 years are over. We need to come together and create our own defensive structures and our own security council and maybe even our own army. We need to spend a lot more on weapons. Now, recognizing that they need it is a long way away from getting it and having it and executing on that understanding. But the mindset has completely shifted since Greenland. And it was about recognizing something everybody had sort of seen and known was coming all along, but suddenly you just couldn't deny it. And the good news is that however long ago that was, a couple of months now, I guess, there hasn't been that much relapse. I mean, that was gonna be my fear, was that people would wake up, but then they would, hit the snooze button and sort of go back to sleep. But they have not really hit the snooze button. They are trying to move ahead with what they say they know, what they understand they need. It's very hard. You got to have 27 squabbling siblings have to agree on something. That is not easy. And you have to rearrange your defense production, and you have to go against your own defense companies that want to just make their stuff for your country. And so there's a lot of head crunching and changed habits have to happen, and it's not going to be fast. But at least again, they're trying really seriously now.
I, you know, I blame this entirely on Donald Trump's antipathy towards NATO and his bizarre relationship with Putin, but I'm not sure that's right. I don't actually think that's right.
Yeah, I don't think it is. I mean, I think after 80 years of dependence on America, it was time for Europe to wake up. It was
Yeah.
time for America to say, maybe we have to, think. I mean, not that we have to walk away, not that we need to get a divorce, not that we need to be rude to you or threaten to invade you, but let's have a serious rebalancing that isn't just about us keeping you as a client. I mean, it wasn't just that we spent all the money for all those 80 years or a lot of the money. It was that we basically decided what should happen. I mean, we didn't want European commanders. We didn't want Europeans to have sort of independent defense capabilities. We thought it better that we keep a lid on it. And it was a kind of infantilization that suited both sides for 80 years. And it was time to end that infantilization. It's too bad it took what it's taken, but it's good, and again, what you want is not I mean, it's a bad metaphor, because it's still sort of infantilizing. But if you think of it as, the head of NATO called Trump daddy, and everybody in the world winced. But in some awful way, America did play daddy for 80 years. And, as one European put it to me, America would propose something, and we might quibble and differ and slow it down and change it a little bit. But basically, we did what they proposed. And now you have 27 countries, and they have to figure out how to do it together, and it is not easy. But I don't think it's just Trump. I think Trump just again sort of precipitated it in his rude, ugly, nasty way.
Yeah.
But I don't. I think it did have to be precipitated, and I think it's in some long run thing, it's going to be good that it's happening.
I hope so. I mean, it was Mark Carney's speech that clarified it for me. For you know, from the Cold War and through much of the globalization that happened starting in the 90s, it really was a superpower world, but now it's not. Now we have these middle powers that have grown up, and that changes the equation, makes the world much more, I think, complicated and dangerous in many ways. You have all these different, actors on the stage. We're seeing some of that with Iran, which was able to be influential all around its region in a nefarious way. So Europe is now saying, well, it's not that world anymore. We have to react differently. None of that, I think, is good for the United States.
Well, it could be good in the long run. Again, if you think the metaphor, if the sort of ill-fitting but best metaphor we have for the moment is well, let's switch the metaphor. Let's not call it parent and children. Let's call it as in a couple. An amicable divorce. A grown-up divorce where you recognize you have children, and you have to compromise and live together, and I mean not live together, but exist, on the same planet, and make some cooperation, and cooperation would be good and helpful. We could have that, and that could be good for everybody.
It could, but it's more complexity, and we don't seem to be able to manage complexity very well.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. That's for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, I read something this morning where Zelensky said to Trump, or said in his, in an interview he meant for Trump to read, he said, it's all very nice what you promised me some vague security guarantees, but what about after you and after me? And
Right.
Trump doesn't think after himself.
Right.
He's going to be president king forever, and he doesn't think to the future, even if he acknowledges there's going to be one. So.
It's certainly clear he's not preparing the United States or the world for a future.
For tomorrow, for next week,
tomorrow even. So there's some reporting that the U.S. is now getting assistance from Ukraine to figure out how to deal with the Shahid drones coming out of Iran. Is that true? What's the Schadenfreude like on the ground?
Let me move into it. So, I mean, the hilarious thing to me was the piece on the front page of some American newspaper, maybe I won't name it, "What is a Shahed?" I mean, every child in Ukraine, can recognize a Shahed in the sky, can tell you the sound of a Shahed compared to something else. I mean, we have, hundreds a week. Ukraine's been dealing with them, countering them for 4 years. And the interception rate is 80-90%, so they're pretty good at it by now. Sometimes they intercept and the debris falls on an apartment building, but they still shoot down about 80% of them, 90%. They know a lot about doing it. Apparently 10 countries and the US have requested, Zelensky says, some kind of assistance. What does that really mean? I don't know. Zelensky sent 3 teams to the Middle East. I fear they're probably sitting around in the waiting room somewhere. I mean, America's not good at taking advice. And, this is something I'm working on at the moment. Ukraine's had a big push for several years to try to do cooperative defense production with other countries. But, one of the most successful of all the, I won't even call it cooperative defense production, is that Eric Schmidt, former Google chief, has built an American drone, very like Ukrainian drones, that he says is, sort of Ukraine inspired or has a lot of Ukraine input, but basically is not cooperation. It's basically an American bunch of guys from Tesla and SpaceX making an American product kind of inspired by Ukraine, and Ukraine is not getting any money or any intellectual property or any help or anything. I mean, Eric Schmidt has invested a lot of money here, but that is, I fear it's going to go more like that Ukraine, I would like to see Ukraine position itself to be kind of the arsenal of Europe and to help the world with the approach to drones. But I sort of worry that a lot of Western countries think they, know better and are going to sort of do it, learn the hard way by themselves, rather than learn from Ukraine, learn the hard way by themselves. And I mean, Ukraine is different, right? And so there's some ways that America would never be learning from Ukraine. I mean, America likes to have very expensive, exquisite, very highly engineered, weaponry. Ukraine likes to have it as simple as possible. Any soldier can use it.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with you that America likes that, but America's defense contractors love it.
Yes.
They love it.
The American way of doing it, has been this exquisite weaponry that Trump brags about. We make the best weaponry in the world. But so So that's a big future issue to me because I do see that it could be sort of Ukraine's economic future if they play their cards right. But the question is, will the West really listen to them, and can they really help, and do they really build these cooperative relationships? And I don't know what's going on in the Gulf right now. I mean, so in a way, I took us away from your
Yeah,
question, but
yeah.
I
Well,
think
so,
they've
so that's
sent some
interesting,
people.
though, that, I mean, you're thinking that Ukraine's economic future is partly in military production, and that at the same time that Europe needs military production that's not coming from the United States.
Yeah,
Um,
could be plus plus plus, right? If they could work it out, and a lot of people are thinking about that. There's a lot of European companies are trying to, make partnerships here, and a lot of European countries are trying to make partnerships here. Um, I mean, we don't want to say the Israeli model in some ways, but in some ways, Israel had figured out a lot of things, and one was, technical innovation in wartime. You can turn it into an economic asset, and if Ukraine could do that, it would be a good thing. Again, Israel tends to sell very high and expensive defense equipment. What Ukraine makes, that's not the hallmark of what's good about Ukrainian material is high in material, war stuff is high and expensive. But anyway, it's all a game in progress that's related to the war but different.
yeah, look, uh, I'm trying to think. I don't know enough about hotels anymore, but like whatever the fanciest hotel chain in the world is, it's probably not more profitable than like Motel 6.
Right,
You
right,
know,
right,
so
right.
you can build an economy on selling things
That
um,
are
that do the job, that do
Yeah.
the
Well,
job that
that's
people do.
that's how Ukraine approaches it. Good enough.
Yeah. Okay. So um, there is or is not going to be an election in Ukraine while the war continues. What's
It's
the
been it's
status of
it
democracy
doesn't
in
really
Ukraine?
make sense to have an election
Yeah.
here in the wartime because I mean here's the thing. I mean they unlike in America where we sort of shrug our shoulders at the percentage that vote. Here they really would like a large percentage of people to be able to vote, and soldiers are not going to be able to vote. The 5 million people still living in Europe are not going to be able to vote. It's in wartime. It's going to be hard, until they come back. It's going to be hard to set up polling places in places where Russia can send a drone and hit a lion waiting at a polling place. So I mean, it would be possible to organize elections in some way if you didn't care too much about the share of turnout, and you had some time. You could set up polling places in Europe and stuff like that. But there's nobody here who's really enthusiastic about it.
So
Even people who are chafing to who are talking. I
the
mean,
most
Zelensky,
pro-democracy crowd
the
are
the most
saying he can
pro-democracy,
win.
yeah, and even people who, a lot of people are tired of Zelensky and have complaints about Zelensky, but even those people don't. There's nobody really insisting on election soon, except Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. And so Zelensky, who's been again, trying to stay out of Trump's penalty box and keep the negotiations going, has sort of made noises about we could have elections if you give us enough time and ceasefire and stuff like that. But I don't see it happening anytime soon. And I think, the state of Ukrainian democracy is a big topic too. Very democratic instincts, very democratic people, very anti-authoritarian, very, pay attention to politics, and not like in Russia. But there are no political parties to speak of, so it's Ukrainian democracy is a work in progress. Let's just say that. And it'd be nice to have the war over and get on with that work, but I don't think it's going to happen
Who
big
is
time.
doing that work? What kind of groups are doing
Well,
that work?
yeah,
Who's
there's
thinking
civil
about?
society groups here were very big on it before the war, and some still do it. And like the Germans, I mean, various embassies help,
Hmm.
come and teach them how, give whatever.
Hmm.
It's and they've come a long way. I mean, one of my favorite stories here was something I learned early on. So, when there was, and give me a paragraph, when there was in the Soviet Union, there was no private property. So who managed the apartment buildings? Some Soviet lady who sat in the lobby and watched who came and went and told them what they were going to do. We're going to build a garage today or whatever. And then when independence happened and there started to be private property, some cities where civil society played a big role started to say to people, "We're going to have to, now you own the apartments, you're going to have to get together and manage the buildings. Like you can decide when to paint the fence or when to, build a garage or
Mhm.
whatever." And at first, the people said, "No, no, 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 we don't want to do that. We'd literally rather have that Soviet lady and then blame her." But then after a
Right.
while, and a lot of pressure, it was in Mariupol, sadly, where there, whatever, just notably, that it was first pioneered. They started to have these things that were basically tenant councils. They're called OSBBs here. And they're getting, in my building, the OSBB is very important. Like this winter, in the tough winter where the pipes broke and there was no heating and we needed a generator and you had to buy fuel for the generator and all that kind of thing. Who did it? The OSBB. So there's kind of nascent democracy. And you should see the social media chat for my OSBB. I mean, they post dozens of texts a day. They're very participatory.
Yeah, I mean, is this the equivalent of a condo board in the United States?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But
So,
every
so,
ball,
so
yeah.
much maligned, much beloved,
Right, well,
but
exactly. And
everybody
here,
fights.
everybody's a member. Everybody's part of it, right? So
Yeah,
everybody
yeah.
can vote. Everybody can text.
Well,
It's hilarious. So,
in very
they're
local,
democratic.
and
Yeah,
well, I mean, it's a great way to learn democracy because in very local government, very
exactly.
local, and a building is
Exactly.
very local, the stakes are
Exactly.
really high. Like,
Yeah,
should we fix the plumbing or the roof? It's a very
exactly.
important
That's what
question.
we're debating at the very moment.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, and that stuff is that's how people learn how to manage the questions in a democratic system.
Exactly.
Yeah, not I think in a presidential election in the United
Right. But they do
States.
have to, I do think building parties is a really important thing. I mean, I think, parties, that's how you guarantee some continuity of ideas and some ideology that isn't just personal. I mean, what's wrong with Soviet politics is or Russian politics, Soviet politics, is that it's all about, it's factions driven by people. And and to some degree, that's been true here too. And that's not good. You want to have a different kind of structure that can
Talk
also.
about that's really interesting word you chose. It was a word factions was a word that the founders in the United States were terrified about faction. So in your view, what's the difference between a faction and a political party?
Well, again, so when Zelensky came in, and I mean, this was true of Macron too. It's not just, in Ukraine, but, people voted for Zelensky. They didn't vote for a bunch of ideas that
Right,
Zelensky embodied, that Zelensky learned from the guy before or five guys back.
right.
They voted for Zelensky, and and a bunch of members of the parliament were voted in then too, who were basically loyal to Zelensky. And when Zelensky, and I mean, if you look at Macron, and Macron sort of lost his luster, what was left? There wasn't, he doesn't have a successor. There's not a body of ideas that really that is being passed on. I mean, it could be passed on. Macron stands for things, but there's no sort of institutional structure that stands for it. And there's no, people like belonging to clubs, look at Americans. I mean, in the sense of Democrat, Republican, what party are you? Sort of a way to kind of vaguely shape your political beliefs. And again, if it gets, especially I think when it gets mirrored, I mean, I haven't thought about any of this systematically before, but when it gets mirrored in the way government works, where it's about loyalty pyramids, which is a lot of what, used to happen here and increasingly we're moving away from, but still happens to some degree. There's some guy at the top that some bunch of people are loyal to. Even if they're not kicking back bribes, they're sort of living by his protection. If you have parties, you get less of that. Working
I
parties.
see. So that's really, and if you make that distinction, then the breakdown of the Republican Party in the United States is a move from a political party that stands from something to a faction that is where do we get ours? Where
Exactly.
do people come from?
Exactly. Exactly. And it's also that same kind of protection politics, right? Like you can move ahead with your project because you have a line to the guy at the top. That's not the way anything should work in the world, you know?
That's the way a lot of the world works. It just
I
hasn't been
know.
here for
Yes.
anybody can
Yes.
remember it being here before. Um, so, how closely over there are people following politics over here?
Pretty closely. I mean, they were. they don't always have a clear view. I mean, if you remember, and I think we may have even talked about this, people had a lot of hope for Trump. They were so sick of Biden that I mean, they followed the passage of the supplemental, you know, and they stuff like that, and they were so sick of Biden sort of you know, give enough to keep the Russians at bay, but not enough to win, that they really had hopes that Trump would be better, that he would be bolder and, you know, take their side. And so they followed the election pretty closely. And then, of course, they were immediately very disappointed. They're now pretty disappointed about the world in general. I mean, they do feel that they're fighting on their own and that the world, you know, talks a good game but doesn't help enough. And I think that's largely true. And so I think there might be a little less following now. I mean, I don't know, you know,
Mhm.
and I haven't, it's not something yeah, I mean, that's what I would say, basically.
We continue to hear from, Trumpists, J.D. Vance and Trump himself. Ukraine can't win, so they need to cut the deal. Right
That's
now, they need
ridiculous.
to cut the, they're just going to lose.
That's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. I mean, it's not, Russia has, you know, the joke is that Russia in World War II, in 3.5 years, Russia moved from, you know, Moscow to Berlin. In 4 years here, Russia moved from Donbass to Donbass. It's like, you know, in many places along the front, they've moved like, you know, matter of yards, not even kilometers, not certainly, and, you know, not miles. So they're not making progress on the front. They have more men. But the war is getting more, but they lose men at a great rate, and Ukraine's getting better at countering without as many men. They have more money to produce weapons, and unfortunately, the rise of the oil prices has helped them a bit. But you know, a few weeks of high oil prices are not going to make that much difference. You need a year of higher oil prices to really put them back on a solid footing. So, you know, I think, you know, without America intervening on their side to give them a good deal, to get them a good deal at the negotiating table, I think you're facing you know, a very long war of attrition still. I don't see either side prevailing anytime soon. Now, wars of attrition do change, you know, sometimes wars of attrition are sort of gradual and then all of a sudden.
World War
But
One was that. Kind of just
but I don't see
finally.
that happening here. I don't see that happening here. Again, Ukrainians, yeah, I don't see it happening here. I mean, Ukrainian are keeping up despite a much smaller economy and a much less developed industry, they're keeping up with the weapons innovation. You know, one week one is ahead, and the other week the next is ahead, or 1 month or one period. But they're keeping up step by step. You know, Russia tried to break the Ukrainian morale this winter. And I mean, it was horrible here this winter. It was horrible. You know, I can't describe it. I've never been so happy about spring. I mean, I mean, my building was okay because we had this OSBB and we'd organized a lot of stuff. And I personally had organized some stuff in my apartment. But a lot of people went for 2 3 weeks without heat, without electricity, without plumbing. I mean, plumbing is the worst. I mean, think about it. You can't flush the toilet and you can't wash the dishes, or maybe in the other order. You know, it's horrible.
Mhm,
You know,
mhm.
and you know, old ladies walked up and down stairs to buy their groceries, you know, with no elevators, 10, 14 floors to buy their groceries without elevators. And nobody wanted to give up. You know, people didn't like it, but like they didn't say, "Oh, we've had too much of this."
Now,
And
what's
Russia, you
happened to
know,
prices? Has there been inflation during all of this time?
no, the prices. I
That's
mean, maybe
good,
some. I don't know. I don't know
but not
follow the data,
noticeable.
but
Not
not
not.
yeah, not
Well, that's
noticeable.
amazing.
Yeah. No, the economy, they have good economic management. As far as I know, they've sort of kept the economy going.
Hmm.
But I mean, so you know, the will is not broken, the innovation is not broken. I've just been doing this project writing about the people who do the defense innovation, and you know, they're like Silicon Valley entrepreneurs. They are high on themselves and high on what they're doing, and confident that they're, you know, going to beat the other side. And it's a very, you know, that's, I mean, what you learn in a war zone is that it's sort of an emotional roller coaster, and they're definitely the high side. An interview with one of them, you come away thinking that Ukraine's going to rule the world.
Well, so the battle lines haven't moved very much. What is there? What's the connection between the people where you are and the Ukrainians who are in occupied parts of the
Yeah,
country.
yeah. Well, there's no connection to people in the actual occupied part. I mean, they're
Yeah.
cut off. You know, maybe you have some pigeon that goes back and forth or something, or some tricky way that you communicate with your father stuck
Hmm.
behind the lines, but there's no real communication. Um, and even, I mean, Kyiv is a long way from the front, you know. It's a 6 hour drive or whatever from the front. And except for this winter, I mean, this winter reminded people that they were really at war and gave them sort of some of the war spirit. But you know, now that it's spring, people are sort of back to, and there's still air alerts, you know, every couple of nights, but people are sort of back to getting on with their lives. Whereas, you know, it's very different at the front. People are, you know, fighting every day.
Does
And
everybody have family involved in the war?
well, people do. A lot of
Yeah.
people do. I saw stats early on. It was sort of like 2/3. I don't know if that's really true, but a lot of people do. And it still feels very far away. And some soldiers complain that, you know, some soldiers say, go on, you know, we're glad that life is still normal. That's what we're fighting for. Other soldiers say, you know, we feel forgotten. And the front's, I mean, this is where I wouldn't, you know, Russia's not making progress, but Russia's making life a little more miserable on the front. I mean, the city I used to go to a lot, Sloviansk, was, you know, was always a garrison city, but I could take the train. I mean, I took the train, used to take the train, and then I took taxis and stayed in a hotel, and it was, you know, I felt like I was visiting a, you know, poor city. You can't do any of that anymore. It's much more dangerous. There's no train now. The hotels are all destroyed. There's a lot more aerial incoming every day. And then that's about technology advances. And Ukraine's making it tougher for the Russians too. Basically, what used to be a front line is now what they call a kill zone. So it's now like 20
I
miles
was going to
wide
ask you
on
about
either
that because
side.
I want to actually explore that a little bit. It's an idea that Americans don't understand because we still, when you say the front, people think World War One, and you have trenches, and they're over there, and we're over here, and they're close. But because of the drones now, um, you really don't have a traditional front.
Well, I mean, you sort of have a place where your, you know, area of predominance ends and their area of predominance ends, but it's about, but the band kind of between the two is about 20 miles wide, and there's drones flying over everything, and even 40 miles from those frontline cities, the roads now in Ukraine have like netting over them, have
Mm.
sort of big cages covered with fish netting, because that at least could hold the drone before it drops and explodes on you. And is it a fail-safe thing? No, but it's some protection. So the Russians have drones that can go quite far, and so do the Ukrainians. And but it's more of a problem for Ukraine because they have sort of civilians and more activity there. But but the so and it's changed the way the war is fought. I mean, drones, I remember in the beginning, drones were rare and drones were mostly used to get information and correct artillery fire. Now everything is drones. It's not just that it's something that looks like World War II where there are some drones. All the stuff is basically now done by drones with humans trying to use them. And I mean, you can't go out in the open, you know, near the front without being seen by a drone and targeted. And and drones do, they have, you know, that whole kill zone. You used to be, you would drive across the territory just before the front, or you'd send a tank. Can't bother, no one bothers to send a tank anymore because tank will be destroyed. And you know, a cheap drone destroying a big expensive tank, that doesn't make any sense. The Russians now come like on carts and motorbikes across that last thing to try to, you know, come get closer to where the actual some fighting might happen. And and what was I going to say about the Ukrainians? And I mean, just, you know, drone pilots are the soldiers that matter now. And Ukrainians both sides, but more of the Ukrainians have now robot like driven vehicles that can take food and other supplies across that kill zone, and that can take wounded people out. So more and more and more of it is being done by some kind of robotic machine, and it's horrific in some ways. In some other ways, it's saving lives.
There are movies that come to mind that are absolutely terrifying that that describe this kind of warfare. And
Right.
you attach it to AI, and it gets even more
It
frightening.
gets even scarier. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And now what's the thinking there about our folly in the Gulf?
That's a good question. I think mostly that it's folly. I think, I don't think there's not a lot of there. I don't think people are following it that super closely. My friend's mostly making fun of it, as you would expect, sort of. I don't know what grandma in the supermarket is thinking. I think, there's they don't like when I mean, wars of they're on the wrong side of a war of choice, right? It's not a war of choice for them, but it is a war of choice for the big guy, and that's basically, this is not a war of choice for Iran. It's not a war of choice for Israel, but it certainly is a war of choice for America. And I think Ukrainians sort of think, why would you do that? And they see the chaos. And Zelensky sees it as an opportunity to maybe try to leverage something. I mean, what the biggest problems are, the two biggest problems caused by the war in Iran are that we're using up the basically the missiles that are fired by Patriot interceptors that
Yes.
Ukraine really needs. The only Russians send ballistic missiles, and the only way to shoot down a ballistic missile is with a Patriot. It's the only weapon in the world that can do it. And Ukraine has been desperate for Patriot, basically what are called interceptors. It's basically the bullets that go into the missiles that go into a Patriot. They've been desperate for them for a long time, and I think America's already used 800 in the last week and a half. Here like
To shoot down drones,
to
just
shoot
swiftly.
down
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and missiles. But it's a waste to use a drone with them because they cost $1 million and a drone costs $20,000. But yeah, so America's been using them at a whatever the word is, wasteful rate. So Ukraine's very worried about that, and it's not good to have the oil price so high because that's how Russia is finances the wars with oil revenues,
Mhm.
and America's even started lifting sanctions, and so that's the kind of choke on Russia is the oil price and the oil sanctions, and that's all going in the wrong direction. Again, I think in the long run the oil price will not matter as much. It'll be a short run thing, but the Patriot interceptors could be a big problem. So Zelensky has had this idea, let's trade drones, which we make a lot of, for Patriot interceptors. Now, has anybody taken him up on that? No. Will anyone? I don't know. The other good thing, I think, is that sort of what we talked about before, that Ukraine's drone prowess is suddenly recognized a little bit.
Yep.
And the other sort of the second good thing is that Trump is still saying the wrong thing, is still saying Ukraine, Zelensky should hurry up and negotiate a deal instead of putting pressure on Putin. But he's putting less pressure on these negotiations, and I think that's a good thing. I mean, I never thought these negotiations were going to come to anything, so I'm glad he's distracted.
Is the United States still providing military intelligence to
Yes,
Ukraine?
yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes, and that's very important. They need
yeah,
it. I
that's
mean,
good.
France is doing more, and maybe by now some other countries are doing more, but they're still heavy. I mean, what U.S. provides is that intelligence and the Patriot interceptors. Even if we don't give them, we sell them to Europe to give to Ukraine. And Zelensky thinks that only America can make peace by pressuring Russia. Now, I don't think America's ever going to pressure Russia, so I don't know why he's so. But he is.
Well, I would say ever is a long time. Certainly not in this administration.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but yeah, okay. I'll hopefully leave it at that.
yeah. I mean, I think there's still an interest in the United States in pinning Putin's ears back. It's just not in the administration. But
Well,
Americans, you look at polls, Americans are not Putin's fans, and
yeah,
they are utterly mystified by the
yeah,
president's relationship with
yeah,
him.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
let's hope so. I mean, again, it's hard for me to see. It's hard to know. It's hard to know. Let's not be pessimistic about the future. We don't know yet.
Yeah. All right. So I mean, in another part of your life, you were involved in job training and helping people figure out how to build careers. What does that look like in Ukraine? I'm trying to imagine what the future of Ukraine
Yeah, yeah. That's going to
and
be a big
looks.
issue. That's going to be a big issue here. It's already an issue in the sense that labor shortages are a big issue. I mean, because a lot of people have left and because soldiers are fighting. I mean, there's a big percentage of the country is fighting. Um, so, and a lot of companies have problems with that. And there's a lot of back and forth with the government about can companies have what they call reservations, which are basically deferments. Can they get their workers deferred? Um, After the war, there will be a big need for rethinking what the economy is, or if not rethinking, a
Hmm.
resettling of the economy. What is it? What are they going to make? It used to be that the biggest things here, but traditionally the biggest things were agriculture exports, and they were sort of an industrial base for Russia. And they were sort of coming into their own in some of those things by 2022. But what are they really going to do for their economy, and how much is, for example, defense production going to be part of it? They always have a lot. The IT talent here, engineering talent, has been top of the line all through. So to the point that even before the war, 20% of Fortune 500s had like software shops here.
And is that
We're
part of
used
because the university system there
yeah,
produces
and
talent?
focus on math and the
Okay.
education system and its sort of tradition of engineering and math. And so a lot of IT talent. So the question will be, how do they plug into the global IT and software and, that kind of development world? They're not at the forefront now of AI, for example, because
Hmm.
they've been doing something else, although they have some AI. But how do they plug into that? And then how much is defense? So there's a big question about what they will do. And then there will be a question about where they do it. Because, I mean, it's unlike, a lot of stuff used to happen in the East, and it's already moved to the West. So that but will more, how will that work? And, so big issue, I mean, the big issues of the piece are, will people come back? Will there be enough guarantees to allow investment to flow? I mean, if you look at Poland, Poland has been really the economic miracle of the past 20, 30 years because of European investment. Will that investment come to, and the opportunities for investment in Ukraine will be huge. It has to be safe for investors to come.
Sure, sure.
So before you get to workforce challenges, a lot of these other issues will have to sort of settle. Workforce, as I say, labor force is already a challenge. And, do they have are they thinking about training the way we have? No, we've given a lot of thought to training, but they'll get there,
Okay.
as they need
Well,
it.
uh, I'm sitting in Chicago. Chicago is a very large Ukrainian community, and it got larger in the last couple of years. What do people, I mean, do people there, are they understanding or resentful of people who've left? And what would the people there want to say to the Ukrainians here?
Yeah,
Because,
there is a certain resentment might be a big word, but there are definitely tiers. There's definitely a sort of some kind of spectrum here. Let's put it that way, between how engaged you are. And soldiers, are sort of at one end, and the people in America are at the other end. And people in between, they already are. Again, the software engineers in my building are a long way from the front, but they're also a long way from the people in Chicago.
mhm.
And I think there will be divisions based on that. And Ukrainians are kind of, they think they nurse that kind of grudge. So I
But I
think
mean,
that will be a
are the
challenge.
expats sending money back and doing the things?
People send stuff and people help and people are in communication, and it matters a lot it matters a lot to Ukrainians. Outside attention matters a lot. And I think, to the degree that the diaspora is helping, it means a lot.
Mhm.
But on the other hand, there is a certain, we stayed and stuck it out and you didn't, um, sentiment.
Yeah.
And how it will all get resolved at the end how society will come together in peacetime those will be issues. The
In
soldiers
the
were
last few
struggling.
years, Ukrainian restaurants, not far from where I live, were never full, and now they're packed all the time. In part because there are more Ukrainians here, but also in part because Americans want to support
Right,
Ukraine in ways that our government isn't.
right.
Um, and so I would think some of that would, I mean, it's certainly supporting the expat community, but I'm hoping some of it is making a difference there too.
Well, again, it makes any foreign, when feeling for it's very hard to be suffering and feel forgotten, right?
Yeah.
And so and attention really helps, and I mean, the number of people who, and I think it's absurd, and I sort of, try to discourage it, but who express a great gratitude and appreciation to me. I'm not doing that much. But I'm here and I've stuck it
Hmm.
out, and that just
Hmm.
means a lot to people. And the attention means a lot. And any kind of foreign aid, and the European aid means a lot. There's also, wanting more, and sort of depend, there's variations on the theme, but it means a lot, and I encourage people to come. When European politicians say to me, "Oh, well, I didn't want to look patronizing, or I didn't want to do this, or I didn't want to do that," I said, "Just show up." Makes a
Just show
difference.
up.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're going to leave it there. And the reason why I wanted to do this is I do not want this to be forgotten. I think it's not just important for the people of Ukraine. It is important for the future of freedom on the planet. And we have a president who doesn't see it that way, but I'm hoping the American people still do.
Yeah, no, well, I apologize if we got too techy.
Nope, I wanted to have that conversation.
Okay. But thank you. No, and I appreciate that. And I think Ukrainians appreciate that too. So thank you very much.
All right, appreciate your time.
You're listening to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
Ahmed Baba is a journalist, a political analyst who is making great use of the changes in the media landscape. When I was CEO of the Sun-Times, reporters had beats, right? They covered City Hall, they covered the Cubs, they covered business, they covered labor. Well, Ahmed here has carved out a beat in this new media landscape. It is the truth to power beat, and it is a really important one these days. So I think he was one of the first, certainly among the first reporters who dug deep into Project 2025 and told us all what we were in for. And now he publishes on Substack at Ahmed Baba News, which you should check out and subscribe to. And just a reminder these days, publishing on Substack does not mean just writing. It means podcasts, it means video, it means all of the above. So Ahmed, welcome, and thank you for joining me.
No, thank you for the intro. I really appreciate that. I might have to steal the truth to power beat. That was a cool way of putting it.
Well,
Appreciate you.
it's what I read your stuff. That's what it looks like to me.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's a new media landscape. We're all out here doing what we do. I see you on Substack as well.
Yep.
Creating great content. So this is what we need to be doing now, because especially when corporate media is getting increasingly consolidated. So, we're gonna out here speak truth to power while we can.
Well, let's start with that for a second, because I mean, there is definitely this consolidation, and it's not just corporate consolidation; it's political consolidation of the media on the right. They have forced formerly independent, media companies to sell their news operations to Trump's allies. The same folks own the social media, many of the social media platforms that control the algorithms that people see. I have my own answer to why what we do is effective, but I sure would love to hear yours. Why are you doing this, and why do you think it matters?
Yeah, I mean, I think we just need more people who are willing to be fearless in the way that they criticize this administration, especially when Trump thinks he's got the corporate media game pretty much locked in, right? I mean, we have MS Now, who's still doing really good, pretty much at this point, independent journalism. I mean, they're owned by a corporate entity, but they're not one of these big conglomerates. They're not part of Paramount, Skydance. I mean, not yet, hopefully not. But you got CNN, who's potentially going to be under the control of the Ellisons. And basically, when Trump is out here targeting these corporations, he thinks, we have those settlements. We saw what happened with Terry Moran. These threats that he's imposed on these corporate entities, these owners were able to basically exert editorial control. We see that with Barry Weiss at CBS. And then now for us here in independent media, it's vital, because he'd be playing whack-a-mole with us. We're not one entity, right? There's so many of us that it's hard to really put a chill down our spines, right? I mean, they try to make an example out of Don Lemon, who I actually do a weekly Substack live with him, but he's still going, right? So that's also an example of why it's important. But this administration does not want the truth to be told. They don't want their atrocities to be exposed. I mean, we saw what happened in Minnesota. They know when people know what they're doing, they mobilize against it, and that's one of the reasons why they try to chill speech in the media.
Yeah, I mean, I have a similar answer for me. They will control most of the media. Their message will be out there in droves. But Americans want to know what the truth is. And as long as they can still find it, they're going to find it. Yeah. And so you're out there doing what you do, and I do what I do, and it is a drop in this ocean. And yet people are finding the truth. They want to know that they're sick of being lied to. They want to know the truth. And so it's really important to tell it where you can. It makes a huge difference.
No, exactly. It really does. And
Yep.
because when he's trying to consolidate power in the way he does, truth is the thing that limits that, and luckily, because of the American system, we have this ability to do this, and we're not a system in which speech can be so easily chilled.
Yeah.
The Constitution is really, struck back in a lot of ways, even though he's tried to break it quite a few times here. So
Yeah, it's pretty strong. All right, so I want to play you a clip and get your reaction to it on the other side. Paul, will you play this charming clip from Pete Hegseth from his press conference today?
Some in this crew, in the press, just can't stop. Allow me to make a few suggestions. People look up at the TV and they see banners, they see headlines. I used to be in that business, and I know that everything is written intentionally. For example, a banner or a headline, Mideast war intensifies, splashing on the screen the last couple of days, alongside visuals of civilian or energy targets that Iran has hit, because that's what they do. What should the banner read instead? How about Iran increasingly desperate? Because they are. They know it, and so do you, if it can be admitted. Or more fake news from CNN. Reports that the Trump administration underestimated the Iran war's impact on the Strait of Hormuz. Patently ridiculous, of course. For decades, Iran has threatened shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. This is always what they do, hold the strait hostage. CNN doesn't think we thought of that. It's a fundamentally unserious report. The sooner David Ellison takes over that network, the better.
Thanks, Paul.
Another example.
Well, you could stop
of a fake
there.
headline.
You could stop there. That's plenty.
we've heard enough of his voice.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, what's your reaction when the Secretary of Defense says, "I can't wait for my friend to take over the news because the news is all lies," and then he tells us what the news was saying, and it's all things we know to be true.
It's absurd. They know that this war is flailing. They don't want the truth being told about it. I mean, that I'm glad you brought up the Strait of Hormuz report clip here, because it's not just CNN reported that. The New York Times has a story where they individually reported it as well. And you can just tell by the course of the war that they did not plan for the Strait of Hormuz closing. They seem pretty shocked at this moment. That's 20% of the world's oil supply. And we see that basically, the Secretary of Energy was, I guess in the loop, but they didn't really add the actual institutional input you would need in this process. Like, very clearly, this was very impulsive. So that's just that side of it. It's just very true, the report that he's attacking. But this fits the pattern within the administration. We see Hegseth has previously banned certain reporters. Remember that whole thing where they tried to get them all to sign that pledge? And now we see the defense pool is so diluted that the questions have been increasingly ridiculous. We're lucky.
Well, hold on one second. So for those of you who don't remember this, Hegseth went to the reporting pool, reporters who cover the Pentagon, and said, sign a pledge that says you will only report what I tell you to report, or you have to leave the building. And every outlet that thought of itself as news, including Fox, refused to sign that and got escorted out of the building, and they can only come in with an escort and get escorted out now. So that was then. He's doing it again now with photographers because he doesn't like the way he looks in the pictures.
No, exactly. Yeah, it's insane. I mean, and for him coming from media to do this makes it even worse. Someone who they see it as him being previously among them. It's ridiculous. And Hegseth specifically, it's just this authoritarianism is par for the course with the administration. They want to suppress truth. They want to suppress they want to control how they're being covered. And now, like, Hegseth gave the game away, saying Ellison better just take over CNN, because basically they want to control what's being seen. That headline was a totally benign headline. War intensifies? That's not like some crazy lie. It's just true.
On the same day, right, he said, this will be the biggest attack ever. This will be the biggest attack we've ever had. I don't know. That sounds like the war intensifying to me.
Yeah, it sure does. And he's saying, no, we need to report that Iran is desperate. No, what we need to report is that the Trump administration is desperate. The Trump administration right now is behaving like a flailing, weakened regime. I think that they have a big fear of the midterm loss ahead of them for the same reasons Netanyahu might be pushing this war. because people need to report more on the fact that he has an election this fall, which is one of the reasons why he's pushing for this Iran regime change, because he thinks it'll help him. And then you have Trump over here, whose desperation level finally met Netanyahu's, I guess, because Netanyahu finally got him into this war. They don't want these truths being talked about. They don't want the real truth of the war being said. And now we got this killing of 165 children, schoolgirls, and Trump flippantly lying about it and saying, oh, it was Iran. Didn't even think about it twice. It's just,
Has
again,
he yet to now that the Defense Department has owned up to the fact that it's our missile that did that, and the government has owned up to that, has Trump ever said anything about it? I don't think so.
yeah, I think he was stopped and asked about it, and he just kept saying, oh, I don't know about that, or I had nothing to do with it. Like, now he's trying to distance himself from it, even though it was apparently an error based off 10-year-old data at a school that I've read now had a really heavy online presence as well. Like, it was pretty clear. I mean, maybe not updated Google data, but it was very clear that this was likely a school. And it's that atrocity itself is really one of the most unnerving and disturbing parts of this war right out the gate. This is one of the reasons why I have such a problem with a lot of the NatSec people who go on these panels and say that the military strikes are a success, like they take the military strikes in the vacuum. This was around the same time the supreme leader strikes were happening, that this school was struck. So right out the gate, they made this massive of an error. And they know that the war is out of hand, and they know that this is unpopular, and that atrocity is only going to breed more extremism. Everything they're doing here is backfiring, from the Strait of Hormuz to the increase of terror cells we're probably going to see, to the migration crisis already brewing in Lebanon. It's just a total quagmire of their own making.
Do you have any sense why we're in this war? I mean, the administration's offered 7, 12 different reasons. I can't keep track, but certainly more than one handful of reasons. I mean, I get that the Iranian government is a troublemaking government and has been for the world for a long time. That in itself is not an existential threat to the United States, and it's not I mean, I know. I used to work in that part of the world. Everybody would rejoice at regime change over there, including the Iranians. But that's not what this war is going to bring about. So what is it for?
That's the question everyone's asking, right? Because the justifications they've given are infinite. They just throw spaghetti at the wall. Trump, the week of the strike, was calling different reporters, giving them entirely different justifications, pretty much workshopping this live. He says, oh, it's about the nuclear facilities. But you just told us a few months ago that you had wiped them out completely. But now there's suddenly an imminent threat. So that didn't work. So we moved on. Oh, no, there was actually an imminent threat from ballistic missiles. Well, Caroline Leavitt the other day said, actually, there's no threat to the homeland from Iranian missiles in response to that California news story, right? And then they're just saying, oh, wait, actually, no, Iran we want regime change. We want to help the people. And then right out the gate, you end up slaughtering a bunch of the people, and you're actually not helping any people on the ground. You didn't do anything to restore their internet so that dissident groups could actually coordinate. Like, none of the reasons made sense. And the way I really think this is just that, like I said, I think Netanyahu really roped him in here, because apparently in April, Trump reportedly prevented a strike or told Netanyahu not to do it. And then in June, Netanyahu went ahead and did it. That's what's now known as a 12-day war, even though it's the same war. It's just happened. It's just there was a pause. But basically, apparently, from what I've heard from people and in reports, is that Trump liked how that war played on TV and Fox News and thought it was a success. So then now, after Venezuela, he got high off that. And then this was just Netanyahu pushed at the right time. And I really think that and he's surrounded by yes men and sycophants that wouldn't tell him this is a bad idea. Those who think it's a bad idea are sitting quietly. Like, Vance is trying to leak to the press and say he's skeptical or whatever, but he's surrounded by people that wouldn't push back on this. And now we're in this absolute destructive war that's going to have wide-ranging ramifications, and it needs to stop yesterday.
I think we need to recover a moral compass, and I don't mean the fake prudish, wrapped in a flag religiosity of the right. I just mean like common human decency. This is what President Trump posted on social media. I just want to read you this. He said the United States was attacking Iran's leadership. He called them He said, watch what happens to these deranged scumbags today. I, as the 47th President of the United States of America, am killing them. What a great honor it is to do so.
It's disgusting. There's just really no other way to put it. It's depraved. It's inhumane. It's a callousness. It's a callous view of life. And to say that after you know that we killed 160 girls, like this devaluation of Middle Eastern lives that we see, especially Middle Eastern lives in war, where it's just like collateral damage that these are individual people's worlds that are exploded. These are, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just to take joy in this. It's disgusting. I don't really, and I'm glad you bring up the morals, because I think the moral case just needs to be made. Like some Democrats are making the process case, or, we needed a congressional approval, which of course you did. But also the war is just wrong. It's just wrong. This isn't World War II. This isn't, a Hitler conquest we're facing down. This is yes, the regime is terrible, but so was Saddam. That didn't go well,
So is Putin, and instead
Putin.
We just suspended sanctions on his oil.
Exactly. So it's like, what are we doing here? We're just, it was a total waste. And now what you've accomplished is a more extreme supreme leader who just lost his family, in Khamenei's son. And what does that accomplish for us other than a more destabilized region? We're already seeing these which appear to be ISIS-linked attacks this week. Like
we got rid of our counterintelligence work at the FBI. Doge and the current FBI leadership didn't think that was so important. We got rid of much of our counterterrorism work. So counterintelligence, counterterrorism work, this government got rid of. And they thought, well, we don't have to worry about that. And now, unfortunately, we're at higher risk. It's the most careless government, as it is a selfish government. And Americans increasingly see it. Not partisan Americans. They don't really particularly like Democrats, but they really don't like what the government is doing. And
No, go ahead.
I just, I think they made a lot of statements after Donald Trump won this election. Statements like, I have the biggest mandate in the history of the world, and I won, everything in every state, and we must march on and do what we need to do. And they forgot that they barely won, and Americans weren't for a lot of the things that he knew. By the way, he ran against. You reported this in Project 2025. Like, he was running against those things, and then he did them, and he thought we wouldn't notice.
Exactly. No, I'm so glad you bring that up, because we were all told that Trump won some mandate, that he won the culture war as well as the political war there, and that we're going to have some new MAGA era. There's all these magazine covers of of how MAGA is going to, young people are all now, Gen Z's eternally MAGA, all of this stuff. And then Trump goes ahead and does everything the opposite of what he promised. And he immediately single-handedly tries to raise prices. So the affordability promise goes down the tank. He immediately unleashes Musk with a chainsaw on the CPAC stage while he's actively gutting USAID, which is going to have reverberations for decades.
By the way, it also leaves us blind in places like Iran, right? USAID and Voice of America created relationships so we could know more about what was going on. And if you want to do regime change, those are things you do not change.
Exactly. You literally gut the arm that exerts soft power and real power abroad right before you do this. So Musk is doing that, also gutting the entire federal government, almost single-handedly boosting the black unemployment rate with the federal government purges, which is underreported in my opinion. I think people need to talk more about that. So he's doing all of this, and Americans were rejecting him already. He burned all his goodwill in year one by basically proving all of his critics right. And all the people who were told, he lost the Manosphere Bro podcast. They're all posting their regrets. And then this now, compounding everything else. He was already on track to be decimated in the midterms. And then now you have this war, and you have another round of people who are just saying, like, how many times can you make yourself look like a fool? How many times can you say, oh, I backed Trump because of, no, it was actually about affordability. Oh, that's not a thing. But, well, No, it's about no new wars. That's why. Oh, that's not a thing anymore. So how many excuses are you going to make? And I think that's why his approval rating is approaching, W. Bush term 2 numbers right now.
Yeah. The other thing that happened in year one, he was doing all the things you just said. On the other side, we were learning how to fight back.
Yes.
We were learning how to fight back in the courts, on the streets, in the media, um, even giving backbone to some folks in Washington for the first time to push back a little bit. Um, and I want to ask you particularly about what you hear in the Black community about pushing back, because a lot of the no king stuff are a lot of people who look like me. I mean, like, and not just my color, but my age. You know, there are a lot of old people who are out there fighting this fight. But I hear from young people that they're furious. You know, so like, what do you hear, and do you think people? I mean, when I look at the results of the elections we've had, I see in every community that people are crawling, over each other to vote.
Mhm.
Right. And so these big protests, I think they're enormously important, but I don't even think they tell the whole story.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think the protests are just a public show of the rage within the American people. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think the story of this term is not just Trump's abuses of power, but how the American people have pushed back
Yeah.
forcefully and impressively, especially Minnesota. They were doing so many tactics with these whistle networks and spreadsheets. And I interviewed someone on the ground that went there to see, and it's like these people they're not getting paid for it, but they're using all their professional skills to coordinate and reject a federal invasion of their city. So there's that, and a lot of that was young people as well, young professionals,
Yeah.
and using like technology to innovate. So I think I mean, in the Black community, I'm telling you, we're fed up. They're they may not be showing up at No Kings, but they're going to be showing up at the ballot box, and they are, and they have been. And the Hispanic community as well
Yeah.
is
Well, I
all
mean,
these
like
swings.
in Texas, just in this last election, the Republicans managed to disenfranchise probably 10,000 voters in Dallas.
Mhm.
Right? These were Jasmine Crockett's voters, and um, they made it impossible for voters to know where they should vote. Right? They changed the rules, so you had to vote in your precinct as opposed to where you're used to voting, which was a county-wide place there. And then they didn't publish an updated list of where you were supposed to go. And then their Supreme Court said, yeah, no, you can't stay open extra in order to make it up. So these are voters who were disenfranchised. Trial run for what's coming in the next round, right?
Yes.
But my sense is that people remember this, that they go, you know what? I mean, they don't get, I don't think that's going to help them in the long term. And certainly, I don't think in Black America telling you can't vote, people's memories
Never
aren't
goes
that
well.
short.
Never goes well. No, people's memories are not that short. And that's the thing, is that these arrogant, incompetent, fools,
Cruel,
frankly,
cruel.
cruel, depraved individuals, they think so little of us. They think so little of the American people. They don't think that we're savvy enough to catch on to all this. Trump's been announcing all of his plans. Why do you think January 6th didn't work out? Right? Like, he was in real time articulating the crime. And like, now he's once again announcing, I'm going to send ICE to polling places. Great. Thanks. Mark Elias will have lawsuits ready for that. Oh, I'm going to do that. Okay, great. People are going to be prepared to push back. And okay, we see you at Dallas County. People are going to now have an operation in every single state to inform voters ahead of time, to get them to their right polling places. Whatever you try to do here, Donald, it's not going to work out. And we see with these redistricting, these gerrymandering, they drew those districts based off 2024 numbers, thinking they had locked in this historic, cultural, Latino mandate as well. And you're looking at Texas, some 4 of those 5 districts in the primaries voted in higher numbers for Democrats. So those could be competitive districts. So the gerrymanders might backfire. Everything that they do is backfiring in a real way.
So this is what I think is going to happen, and I want to get your sense. I think there is a blue wave in these midterms.
Yeah.
That we will win the House. We have a fighting chance of taking back the Senate, which I certainly don't think we had 7 months ago. I mean, and and, um, and the SAVE Act, which they are desperately trying to pass, will not pass before the midterms. But I think they're going to say after the midterms, you see, that's why we need it. They cheated to win. They won only because, and there will be no evidence, as there wasn't any in 2020, but they've stolen the ballots from 2020. They're now looking for a way to say, oh, they were fixed. And they're going to be arguing that between the next midterm and the next general, they have to take control of elections because the fact that we won is proof that we cheated.
No,
I see that coming.
Yeah, no, I think 100% they're gonna try to do that, and I agree. I'm glad you're talking about after the midterms because I don't think they're gonna rig the midterms. I think they're gonna try to potentially mess with it, but I think you're right. I think after they're gonna try to use that to justify and fuel what they do in the next general as well. Because you're right. They're gonna try to say, oh, all these weird Tulsi Gabbard probes, Fulton County. We see in Arizona they're getting these ballots. Like it's all nothing. But one of the things that gives me hope is that not just the Supreme Court like tariff ruling, but like their previous track record with these election cases before, and also the fact that Trump's unpopular. Like when we look at history, most dictators know you can't like be this dumb and unpopular at the same time while trying to consolidate power. And it's like right now they're trying you can't do what he's trying to do with that. Like you can't get that many people to go along with it, I think. I think he's lost too many institutions. I think SCOTUS isn't going to rule his way if he tried to like do some power grab. Can you even believe a year ago we had fears of like a third Trump term, and now that's like kind of out the window. I think, unless you think it's a
I don't have any confidence in the Supreme Court. They have not yet ruled on, one of the most important cases,
voting rights,
right? And they have a record of, look, the Voting Rights Act was after the Civil War, we passed amendments to the Constitution, and one said Congress has the power to enact the laws to make sure that voting rights work, because they thought, gee whiz, they thought people would mess with them. And 100 years later, Congress got around to passing that law. One of the greatest, it was one of the greatest laws that any legislative body in the history of the world has ever written.
Yeah.
One that lifted millions of people. By the way, not just millions of people in America who couldn't vote, but millions around the world who saw that the idea of letting everybody vote was what a democracy was all about, right? Yeah. So one of the greatest laws ever written by a legislature. And John Roberts has made it his entire career to destroy that law. And he has a case now, which it might be the last nail in that coffin. So I have no confidence in this Supreme Court.
Yeah, no, that part of it for sure. I do think he's going to continue to gut the Voting Rights Act. He already took care of plea clearance with Shelby, the Shelby case, and it's worrying. I was just saying I don't think that they would rule if he try to seize voting machines, stuff like that. That kind of level of rig, I think they probably wouldn't let him.
At that point, it doesn't matter what the Supreme Court does. Americans by the millions will show up.
So
Americans by the millions, and then we are in a post-law moment until we reestablish it. But we aren't going to wait for the Supreme Court to save us.
Exactly. Yeah, and you're right, and I do agree that I think that voting rights ruling is going to be not probably in the favor of democracy, given Roberts' track record, and it's unfortunate, but I do think the amount of anger among the American people and forceful pushback, I think we're going to turn out in numbers that are too big to rig. Even with the erosion of the Voting Rights Act, I really think we're at this place where it's going to be. He has shown Americans the ugly face of authoritarianism that everyone warned that he would embody, and I think it's gonna backfire on him. Maybe I'm just overly optimistic, but I was one of the people, like you said, that was one of the first to write about Project 2025 in 2023. So yep. I was sitting there warning about this for so long, but then I was hardened over the last year when I saw how badly they fumbled the implementation. Yeah. I thought Russell Vogt was going to be quietly doing it in the background. I didn't know that like they would have Musk be the mascot for it right out the gate and burn all their goodwill. But here we are.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned this earlier. You said it was an untold story about the impact on Black employment in America. Um, uh, why don't you talk about that? Because it's both in the firings that they
Yeah.
did. It's also in the destruction of the Civil Rights Division in the
Hmm.
Justice Department standing on its head, now making companies that if they employ a black man, they have to prove it wasn't it wasn't reverse discrimination. I mean,
Yep.
that is one of the most stunning, again, cynical, horrible perversions of law imaginable.
It's been I'm glad you bring it back up and give it space because it's been, like I said, one of the most underreported, but also one of the most vicious assaults that
Yep.
he did right out the gate, signing these rollbacks on civil rights. He used DEI as a smokescreen and then targeted fundamental civil rights. He rolled back Lyndon B. Johnson's Equal Employment Opportunity Executive Order. He targeted DEI and then also wrote executive orders to target DEI not just in the government but in the private sector to try to discourage it or face threats. So
Mm-hmm.
that likely has untold things we haven't even quantified yet, but we're seeing it in the Black unemployment rate. Nearly 8. I think it was 7.7% February. Last time I checked, it surges above all other demographic groups. And then the federal government, which was previously nearly about almost 20%. I think it was 18% of the federal workforce was Black people before Trump took office. When you decimate that workforce, it's going to be Black people that disproportionately get impacted. So we see a surging Black unemployment rate. We see a erosion of fundamental civil rights in the workforce. So that boosts unemployment. And then you have the way he's targeted history and Black, like try to take the anti-critical race theory nonsense to target fundamental Black history, whether it's in the museums or forcing schools to do it or trying to twist Harvard to, all of this stuff he's been doing. It's been so anti-Black. And
By
it
the
has
way,
had real impacts.
Black folks who got fired in the government, many of them were also veterans. So
Yes.
you went after Black Americans who fought for this country, and you threw them out of a job.
It was insane. And it was reminiscent of, Black Americans went off to World War II to fight, fascism abroad and came home and didn't have their own rights guaranteed.
But that led to that generation. I mean, we've been trained, because the baby boomers are so selfish, to think about civil rights was a 1960s phenomenon, right?
Yes.
But the only reason why we got those laws in the 60s is that generation of fighters came home after World War II and said, I'm sorry, this is not what I did that fighting for. And from late 1940s until 1960s, that's when the Vernon Johns and these just enormous, great work on civil rights that led up to the stuff that people talk about.
No, exactly. It's spot on. And it's that fundamental patriotism, the audacious patriotism of Black people who love a country that didn't always love them. And they keep trying to push it to be its best self every time. Did it in the 60s, did it in the 40s, did it in the 1800s. After Reconstruction, there was like over 1,000 Black officials elected. People forget about that. There was a lot of progress before Reconstruction got rolled back and Jim Crow came. So we're seeing these same cycles again and again, progress, regression. We're still in the post-Barack Obama backlash stage, but I think hopefully, like we've been talking about, I'm glad we're on the same page on a lot of this. I think, Trump has really fumbled in real ways, and hopefully after this, we go into 2028 and we're able to be in a place where we can focus on rebuilding the country, not only rebuilding, restoring, but expanding and making things better.
Yeah. Well, that's going to be where we have to end as we run out of time. But listen, I really appreciate your spending that time with me today. Tell everybody again where to find your work.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is a great conversation. We got to do this more.
I'd like that.
Whether on Substack or somewhere else,
Yep.
or even here. But yeah, you can find me at Ahmed Baba News on Substack, or you can just Google me, my name, Ahmed Baba, and all my socials will pop up as well. We're doing independent journalism, so would love to if you could subscribe and follow me over there.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, my friend.
Welcome back to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
Okay, everybody, I am thrilled to be joined by the awesome Elizabeth Jacobs. She is an epidemiologist, a professor emerita at the University of Arizona. She's a founding member of Defend Public Health, and she has done as much as anyone in the country to shine a spotlight on well, on the destruction of the whole infrastructure of public health at the hands of RFK Jr. Elizabeth, thank you for joining me again.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction and for having me again.
Can we start with they want to nominate somebody else into this government who has no business having the job they want him to have, and that's Casey Means as the Surgeon General. Can you introduce him to us?
Sure. Casey Means is she is a physician and she went to Stanford and she looks pretty good on paper at first. However, when you scratch the surface, you can see that she espouses a number of pseudoscientific type of beliefs. She also has profited from selling questionable medical interventions, dietary supplements, things like that. And most worrying is that she just had her confirmation hearing a couple weeks ago, and she was asked if she would simply recommend the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, and she could not answer that question directly. And to me, that's it. You're done because this isn't controversial. We are in the midst of a measles outbreak, and a doctor who cannot say that they, without reservation, recommend the MMR vaccine is not somebody that we need as Surgeon General.
And what was it that like grabbed her and said, don't recommend this? Clearly, she knows it's effective. Clearly, she knows it's safe. I mean, this is not a new vaccine. What is it that that stops these people from saying this?
Well, she runs in that pack with RFK Jr. And, they're kind of in a world, in a bubble where they communicate through social media, but don't really get or listen to much feedback from their colleagues. So it's just part and parcel of this group of people that's shot to fame via posting on social media, taking shots at COVID-19 vaccines and people who actually know how to do public health. And so it's just another person in that group. Now, I will say that just today there was an article on NBC News where she has now provided written responses to some of the questions that she got during her confirmation hearing. And she suddenly has now said that she is happy to promote the MMR vaccine. And this is interesting for a lot of reasons. One is that, again, this reveals that she has zero integrity, because if she really believed that, she wouldn't have had a problem endorsing the MMR vaccine during her hearing. What's more interesting is that the entire Trump administration seems to be trying to put out the fire that they lit related to vaccinations now. There have been several things that have just occurred in the last 2 days or so that indicate that somebody gave them a message that this anti-vaccine stuff is not going to go well for them. It's not going well for them. And I believe that she was instructed to change her response in the hopes that they can sneak her by and get her confirmed anyway. But as we know from RFK Jr., from some of the Supreme Court justices, what they say in these hearings and in private does not correlate with what they actually do when they are confirmed.
Yeah, I mean, there's also the don't do anything with the cameras rolling that you can end up on social media, uh, you know, uh, saying something that we don't like, but you can go ahead and put it in written testimony because who reads anymore?
Right. That's absolutely true.
Okay, that's her. Did we have another meeting of the committee that decides about COVID vaccines?
The advisory committee on immunization practices is continues just to be a goat rodeo, as I refer to it often. They were supposed to meet in February, and they just didn't. They didn't really provide any explanation for that. So they then decided they're going to meet March 18th and 19th. And usually, given that that's less than a week out now, they will provide a public agenda and even some of the materials that they're presenting. However, neither of those things have been posted yet. Furthermore, there is a judge, Judge Brian Murphy, is currently evaluating a preliminary injunction against this committee. And if he issues it next week, he said he would rule before this scheduled meeting on March 18th, then they may not be permitted to meet because of this lawsuit against them by the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American Public Health Association. And I do have to add, Defend Public Health has provided 2 amicus briefs in support of the lawsuit against him. So there's a lot of things flying around about what may or may not occur next week, because the other piece is that there's been scuttlebutt that they're going to talk about the COVID-19 vaccine. And then an article in Washington Post came out and said, actually, no, they're toning that down. Because again, this is part of the Trump administration's pivot on vaccines, but they're trying to turn around a ship that they have basically set sail with misinformation, disinformation, and attacks on public health.
Well, look, I'm all for them turning it around. I mean, if they want to start sailing in a healthy direction, I'm all for it. That doesn't mean I forget.
Absolutely.
It doesn't mean I forget where they were going.
Right.
What's at stake in this lawsuit? Why? What are they doing so crazy that that they could possibly be told they're not allowed to meet?
Well, a lot of it has to do, this lawsuit was filed last summer, and a lot of it has to do with RFK Jr., completely dismantling this board and putting people who are unqualified on it. And so they immediately started making some very questionable decisions. They took away the Hep B vaccine at birth. And then Kennedy announced that he is personally cutting the childhood vaccine schedule. So all of those things are actually potentially could be affected by this preliminary injunction.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, these are not the only crazy things they're doing. The FDA had, I mean, they waded into autism, right? Kennedy was going to tell us what the causes of autism were and how to treat it. And they sort of said that some drug would treat it. Now they're sort of not saying that. What's going on with, I mean, if you know, like parents of kids with autism, it's terrifying and frightening. And to play on their fears and their hopes in a way that is not grounded in science is just cruel.
It is. It's completely heartbreaking. And to make a long story short, Trump and Macari and RFK Jr. announced that this drug leucovorin could be used to treat autism. That was I've lost track of time, like a month or 2 ago. And that was also the same time when they asserted that Tylenol causes autism.
Yeah, this was September.
Yeah, okay. So obviously I've lost my time, but it's so harmful that they came out and made these very strong statements that, oh, Tylenol causes autism spectrum disorder. And then they had to walk that back. So immediately the letter that went out, toned down these statements that Tylenol causes autism. And leucovorin was part of that. It's a B vitamin. And then the FDA just this past week, approved leucovorin, but not for autism. So that tells you again that they were completely wrong in making these strong statements. And as you just said, the thing that is so upsetting to me is parents who've got kids with a condition. It can vary widely. They're looking for help. This might give them hope. And in fact, we saw that prescriptions for this medication doubled. And then they turn around and admit that it's actually not effective. And so, as someone who has a chronic condition myself, this type of hope and then pulling the rug out is absolutely devastating, and it is cruel.
Do they, I mean, I hate to ask, but is it a donor who owns the company that makes the drug?
Well, funnily enough, Mehmet Oz used to be affiliated with a company called iHerb, which sells this drug. Um, Now, we are told that he has completely divested himself of his connections with this company when he took his role in the government. And I honestly don't have any reason to believe that's not true
Yeah.
in terms of on paper. However, when you are working with a company, you still have connections there, right? So whether it's just a low simmering bias or an intentional desire to push business their way, this is why people are concerned about conflicts.
Well, not this administration. I mean, Jared is in the Middle East soliciting business while he is, taking bids for whether we should go to war or not.
Absolutely not this administration. You're absolutely right. Although they
Hang on, I
claim
want to go
they,
back
they
to the,
claim they are.
yeah,
Oh, go
no,
ahead.
nobody believes that. No, let me go back to the Tylenol thing. Was this when the president, when Donald Trump stood there and told pregnant women not to take Tylenol?
Correct. Yes, that is exactly when that happened.
And like Tylenol is you know, basically the only thing you can take when you're pregnant for pain. I
Right.
mean, okay. So and I think I'm right in this. Um, Tylenol sales did go down after that. So all of
Yes.
this is messing around for some reason in ways that make no scientific sense, make some economic sense to some people, I guess, or make some profit for some people, but don't help America's public health in any way.
No, they don't. And in particular, it really indicates that what we already know, which is that there are individuals leading HHS who have no understanding of scientific method, of research, and of what it means for something to be causal or correlational. They don't care if it supports their political beliefs. I believe personally that when RFK Jr. announced that he's going to share the causes of autism, that he desperately wanted to say it was vaccines, and somebody wouldn't let him because that is a frank lie. So they had to pivot to something else that would give them splashy headlines, and they picked Tylenol. So that's personally my belief.
Have they
So
gotten, I mean, have they gotten better about, I mean, or I should just say, like, is there anything that's happening? I guess this pivot is a sign that the public is winning and pushing back and pushing back and pushing back. But is there any sense that are they hiring people who you could if they aren't anybody you can respect?
nope. And I say that because again, there's an article in the Wall Street Journal this morning that names a person who's now basically got RFK Jr. on a leash. And this individual is a healthcare executive. And, again, on paper, oh, okay, maybe he knows what he's talking about. And maybe he does, but I will say that there is a huge gulf between a healthcare executive and public health. There is no training that we should even believe this individual has in public health. And healthcare and public health are actually two different fields. So it's deeply concerning. Do I trust this person who's allegedly going to keep RFK Jr. in line? Absolutely not. No.
Okay. And just in terms of, I mean, during Trump won, public health was, of course, the biggest question that he had to deal with. We were in the middle of a COVID epidemic, and he bungled it terribly, and used it to divide Americans in ways that are still uh, bouncing around with horrible implications for our society. Is there any reason to think? Well, I mean, is public health is less important in this time to this administration than it was last time? Um, does that mean that they're not thinking about it at all? And the president is just letting Kennedy do whatever he wants because he likes the idea of somebody with that name in his administration? Or do you get a sense that the White House it really cares about this in some way that makes no sense?
That's a great question. I think they care about it politically. That's
Yeah.
it. I think, like you said, there's been such a pushback that I have said for many years that you cannot hide an outbreak of a vaccine preventable disease. You can't hide it. People are going to see it and they're going to know about it and they're going to know why it's happening. And that's exactly what's happening right now with this absolutely uncontrolled measles epidemic. And I think that's what's driving it. It just doesn't look good. People aren't happy about it.
We were at risk, I think the last time you and I talked, of losing our status as a measles elimination country or whatever it's called. But did we lose that status or did they find a way to forestall it?
Oh, what a great question again. Yes. Earlier this year, RFK Jr., there were stories of him trying to push the Pan American Health Organization away from evaluating the United States measles elimination status.
Yep.
And that is because we've, for all intents and purposes, actually already lost it. But he somehow has managed to convince the organization to wait until after the election before they decide whether they officially declare that we've lost it or not. So, yeah, that's typical of them. They want the facade and they don't want to acknowledge the consequences of their own actions.
How bad is the I don't know what the word is. Measles, is it an epidemic? No. Are the various measles outbreaks in the country?
How bad are they? Well, I mean, they're terrible in the sense that they're terrible, period. I mean, 3 people have already died, and we also aren't totally sure about hospitalization rates. There was a story about South Carolina um, struggling to sort of get the information on hospitalizations out. And so part of it is we don't actually know how bad it is. We have somewhat of an idea, but in the year 2001, we had eliminated measles from the United States, and now we are just in thousands of cases already for this year, and no end in sight. So whatever they're doing right now, I agree with you. It's great that they're trying to turn the ship, but the sustained attack on public health and the people who do it is going to make it very, very difficult to now say, oh, wait, you should trust people in public health again.
No, I agree with you. It's like saying we should trust Pete Hegseth again with war, right? It's just like, no, yeah. So what other diseases should we be worried about, like measles, that might be resurgent? I mean,
So
polio?
all of them, yes, because measles is a bellwether because it's the most contagious of the diseases that we vaccinate for. When you see it, it's an indication that vaccine coverage is dropping. And so it's the first one out of the gate. We are starting to see some mumps outbreaks. I don't think that they exceed anything usual now, but I'm definitely keeping an eye on that. And of course, whooping cough has been on the rise as well. And you're asking if polio, for example, could come back? Sure. I mean, if they keep playing this game and people aren't getting vaccinated, there's no reason to believe that polio could not reestablish itself.
Okay. So I just want to end with one thing you and I talked about before, but we should repeat it as often as possible. Remind everybody why you can get vaccinated, but if everybody around you doesn't, you're not safe anymore.
Well, there's a couple of reasons. One of them is that there are babies that are too young to be vaccinated, so they literally can't get MMR until they're about a year old. There are people who are immunocompromised or immunosuppressed that are still susceptible to diseases, even if they are vaccinated themselves. And so the third major piece is that if we let these diseases run rampant without stopping them, we could actually pop a mutation that causes a pathogen to completely evade our current existing vaccines. So that's three ways that it's of concern. And I just really want to emphasize again that community immunity is really important to protect all of us. Yeah, so that's it.
All right. Well, listen, as always, I love talking to you. Very helpful, and we'll stay tuned to see whether ACIP meets and what comes of it.
All right, that sounds great. Thanks again for having me.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
All
Really
right,
appreciate it.
take care.
Bye. All
Bye.
right, everybody, we're going to turn to federal budget and money when we come back after the news.
Welcome back to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
Okay, everybody. It's a little after 3 o'clock here in Chicago. The river is still green, and I'm joined by Bobby Kogan, who has been with us before. He is the Senior Director of Federal Budget Policy at the Center for American Progress. He has had leadership roles in the Senate Budget Committee and at OMB. Bobby, welcome.
Edwin, thanks so much for having me back.
Hey, look, can I start with this? DOGE was meant to save taxpayers a fortune. Instead, it seemed to be a costly failure. I think Trump's spending $1 billion a day in Iran, and he has billions in refunds from the tariffs on top of tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans. Like, what kind of a hole is he digging for us?
Yeah, I mean, if you think the DOGE was about making the government more efficient, it didn't do that. In fact, it led to massive increased inefficiencies. It's going to raise the cost of contracts in the future now that companies are going to kind of price in the possibility that the government will renege on its contract later. That sort of thing is obviously deeply inefficient. We had the war, as you say, which $1 billion, maybe even $2 billion a day, close to. The official estimate was $11.3 billion for the first 6 days of the war, which works out to a little bit under two. These things, that's just the munitions cost. Obviously, there's going to be, all the rebuilding that we have to do from our own, our own kind of destroyed assets and that sort of stuff. Just to say, this administration has never shown any interest in being efficient, right? If they were looking for efficiency, they wouldn't have done a $4 trillion or $5 trillion tax cut. If they were looking for efficiency, they wouldn't be kicking vulnerable people off of Medicaid, which is going to, and taking away people's health, taking away people's food, all these things that lead to lower productivity for them in the future, lower tax base. But instead, they're pushing the things that they want to do, right? Iran has been on the president's mind for a very long time, especially Pete Hegseth's mind and a lot of the generals. This is something they've wanted to do, and it's not really about the budgetary impact. It's about what they want. They want to appear tough. They want to flex. They want to use the things that they've been buying with the military budget. And sure enough, they have been using a lot of these missiles, cost $13, $14, $15 million per missile. And we've been going through our stockpile, years worth of stockpile in just a couple days, despite senior members of the military recommending in as strong terms as possible against it, going in without a plan, right? We saw that some people said, hey, boss, we're really worried worried that this is going to spike oil prices. And the president said, no, don't worry about it. And now just the other hour, he said it's going to be a team effort to clean up the mess that they didn't plan for. So I think the resounding thing we've seen is folks jumping in when they don't necessarily have a plan. They haven't necessarily thought it through. They think they'll be able to wing it.
Yeah, and I mean, I asked you about the costs in part because that's, unbelievable expertise you have. But I want everybody listening to pay attention to the way Bobby answered it, because the costs are only part of it. Really, the question when you decide to go to war is it a war you should be in? What is it a war you need to be in? Is it a moral war? Is it defensible to be in the killing business like this? And in this case, I think the answer is no. No.
Yeah. No is the right answer. I mean, I'd say, look, I'm 35. My entire life has been wars that have horrendously backfired. On paper, if you ask folks, on paper, removing the Taliban from power was going to be an unequivocally good thing for the world. On paper, removing Saddam Hussein from power was going to be an unequivocally good thing for the world. And instead, we destabilized entire regions of the world that led to hundreds of thousands of direct deaths, and if you count indirect effects, millions of deaths. We made the very people that we were ostensibly trying to help significantly worse off. Allegedly in pursuit of something good, but instead we harmed a whole bunch of folks. We spent trillions of dollars. We killed millions of people. It was wasteful in every capacity. It was wasteful from a budgetary impact. It was wasteful from a human life impact. We did the exact opposite. I do budget stuff for a living, right? And so I can go out here, I can say, oh, what does $11.3 billion mean, right? Like $11.3 billion, that could have been 1.5 million people on Medicaid instead, right? Like I can tell you that. I can tell you about priorities. But the real effect here, as you say, right, this is the moral impact. We are killing people. One of the first things we did was we bombed a school. We bombed a girls' school, and we killed 175 kids. That's one of the first things that we did. And the president tried to blame it on Iran when our own military was like, that actually seems to be us, right? So, I don't know what to say other than I wish we had different leadership.
Yeah, I mean, again, just to stay on this topic for a second, from the perspective of Israelis on October 7th, getting rid of Hamas seemed like it would be exactly the right thing to do, right? They'd taken hostages, they'd brutally killed people, and now all this time later, you have Hamas is still there, and Gaza is a complete ruin. It looks like the only strategy Donald Trump has for Iran is to turn a country of 92 million into Gaza, which was, not quite 1 million. I mean, just the most dreadful war crime kind of thinking imaginable.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely right. And I would just say our Secretary of Defense, I mean, there's a reason he wants to rename it the Department of War. It's because that's how he views it, right? And you see, he doesn't say this in exact words, but it's very, you don't have to, it's very clear what he means. He thinks that the rules of war are woke, right? He basically says that we're not going to be bound by the Geneva Conventions. We're not going to be bound by limitations, right? He thinks that that's the things that he eschews. It's the things that he decries. He thinks that we shouldn't have to abide by international law here, and we aren't. I mean, and as simple as that, we aren't, right? The United States is one of like a few countries in the world that has not officially officially not signed on to a lot of these things. Now, of course, we are committing crimes against, that we ourselves think are illegal, right? Just the other day, maybe it was earlier today or maybe it was yesterday, the Secretary of Defense said that he would give no quarter, which of course is extremely
Which is, of course,
illegal.
a war crime. Yep, it's a war crime.
Yeah, this is a war crime. But inside of all of this is that it's a tough guy attitude where these folks are cosplaying being, super warriors and instead condemning other people to die, right? It's
let's be clear, it's an extension of a domestic behavior. Hundreds and hundreds of judges appointed by Republicans as well as Democrats, even judges appointed by Donald Trump have said, with respect to the government's use of force in the United States, they're violating the law. And they continue to violate the law. And they continue to go to court and lie about it. And judges said so. So this isn't just, you and me talking about on the other side of the world. This is a lawless administration. And now they're being lawless with the most powerful military on the planet.
That's right. And in fact, one of the most forceful rebukes of DHS behavior came from a Reagan-appointed judge who quoted Ronald Reagan. He was doing the Beacon on the Hill quote, right? Because some of these folks are, they're apoplectic about it. And to your point, that is exactly, this kind of like no limitations is something they have, they feel very strongly. They don't want to be limited, but I would just, obviously this is my bleeding heart, whatever, but I feel like those limitations are what make us stronger. It's what gives us the moral clarity here, right? Like we reject the idea that just because we can, that makes it okay. I used to work in the Senate Budget Committee. I watched the Senate Budget Committee hearing the other day, and it was on sanctuary cities. And one of the Democratic witnesses is David Beer of Cato. David is not a Democrat, but he was one of the witnesses here.
Close to a Democrat. Yep.
Yeah, not a Democrat. Not Ted Kennedy. Sorry, John Kennedy. The senator
from Louisiana.
He said, "Oh." Yeah, exactly. That's right. From Louisiana, was reading some of his tweets back to David, and he said, "Oh, look at how extreme you are, David." And David, one of his tweets said, the U.S. members of the Senate and House who got in trouble with some heavy quotes for saying refuse illegal orders. He said, actually, that didn't go far enough. They shouldn't have just said refuse illegal orders. They should have also said it's also your duty to refuse immoral orders and unethical orders, because there are plenty of things that are legal but still unethical. And Kennedy said, Kennedy kind of attacked him for that. And David responded and said, Senator, do you disagree? Do you think that they should follow unethical orders? And Kennedy just moved on. But, you could tell he was angry and flustered. And I think that speaks to something real here. There is a fundamental disagreement on what is ethical and what is owed to fellow human beings, right? I go back to Iraq, I go back to Afghanistan because they were important in my, me developing my idea of what made sense and what was okay, because, that was when I was coming of age. And I can't imagine millions of people having their lives snuffed out, never getting to experience the things they wanted ever again, because our president jumped in without a plan. His hubris and his ineptitude led to millions of dead people who just wanted nothing more than to love their family. Right? That's all they wanted. They wanted to live, they wanted to laugh, and they wanted to love their family and their friends and just experience life. And we have already led to thousands of dead civilians. And of course, we've destroyed water, sanitation. And the president is threatening every day to do something much worse. I don't think he's going to drop a nuke, but the way that he's talking, he's basically threatening to drop a nuke if he doesn't get what he wants. And so,
and he doesn't even say what he wants. So it's impossible to comply.
Right.
But, and I know that region very well. I've worked there in that part of the world for 15 years. I worked there all the time. And what he has risked, these are big countries with 90 million in Iran, 70 some million in Saudi, lots of people in the other Gulf states with no water. So they rely on a handful of desalination plants. If they get hit, if they are somehow taken out in this war, there is just simply not enough water for people to survive for a week. So the risks are off the charts, and they didn't think about it. They didn't think about closing the Straits of Hormuz. They're beyond incompetent. They shouldn't be allowed, to be crossing guards at a school, let alone be in charge of weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah.
Well, let me change the subject because this one's too depressing. And just for a minute, talk about how Donald Trump has raised prices on every single American with his tariffs. And then, oops, the Supreme Court says they're illegal, so I'm going to double down on them because nobody tells me what to do. I mean, the Supreme
That's
Court
right.
gave him a gentle out, for God's sake. They could have saved him from his political mistake.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's so interesting because, there are lots of reasons that Donald Trump won, but in my opinion, the thing that was kind of the most salient is a lot of people saw the economy of 2019 when he was president. They said, things are pretty good right there. And they said, I want to return, I want to return to that era where I felt good economically. The president ran on addressing affordability issues. He ran on making things kind of feel right again. He ran on lowering prices. And instead, the president doesn't have that many levers, but where the president has levers, President Trump has made things worse in basically every single way. So one way is that he kicked millions of people off their health insurance and took food away from millions of people. Another way is that he has unilaterally, illegally raised prices on all imported goods. That's the tariffs, right? And so, the estimate is that we're talking like the average household is like $1,700 worse off per year, and this actually it hits the poorest the hardest because, if you're rich, you do so right. A lot of your money can be savings. But if you are poor, if you're working, if you're just trying to make sure that you can afford to make ends meet, you're spending every dollar you have. Exactly. And so yeah. So you have all of that.
Yeah.
Sorry. Please go on, Edmund.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so you got all of that. President claimed that he had this power under IEPA, which he didn't. Supreme Court says it's unconstitutional. The liberals say, hey, the text doesn't allow you to do this. And then, based on the plain reading of the text, three of the six conservatives say, use the major questions doctrine, which is something they've been using to kind of nuke a lot of regulation, and say that applies here. They gave him the out. It's the more, it's the less crazy of the six of them. President turns around and says, okay, well, I'm going to use a different authority instead. He says, I'm going to use Section 122 for now and then work to Section 232 stuff, right? And so he says, I'm going to do the same thing, imposes the same thing on people. It's weird. It doesn't really make any sense. Some of our countries, the way that he's doing now is kind of a flat rate. It's higher in some countries, lower in other countries. But the takeaway from all of this is that it's one of the few things the president really wants to do. He really, really, really believes in making imported goods be more expensive. Now, it doesn't really make any sense conceptually. I guess the way that I'd put it to you is that it's based on this idea that trade is bad and that we should be self-reliant on everything we do. But we are all better off if we can choose how we want to use our services. And the way that I'd put it is I have a trade deficit with my local Chinese restaurant. I can make Chinese food, but I'm not that great at it. So I give them money and they give me goods and services. And so I have a trade deficit with them and we're both better off for it, right? They're happy to get my money. I'm happy to get their Chinese food. That's a good thing. And so the United States government and the government, businesses and individuals do this with goods produced not by them and goods produced overseas, and that's okay. And the president says, no, we should make that more expensive. So we're in this crazy place where the Supreme Court said it's unconstitutional, like what you did was illegal. Ostensibly, then these businesses are owed money for the taxes that were illegally imposed on them. The Trump administration has been a complete 180 when they were arguing in court why they ought to be able to do this. It's because it's all really easy. Now they say it's impossibly hard to do. So they do a 180 on kind of their justification. And so now they say, well, no one's kind of owed any money, and they just want to keep doing it. They didn't take their out, and they said it's one of the few things that they are truly, truly, truly believe in. Trump doesn't believe in most things. He believes in deportations. He believes in taxes on imported goods, these tariffs.
Yeah, he believes in lining his own pocket, and he believes that if we have to give refunds, that's going to be a problem for a Democratic president after he's gone, because he's not going to follow the law until then to do it.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
This is going to be a problem for the next president.
Well, yeah, it's look, it's also there are lots of ways in which this is pretty tough, right? Like one very real thing is that the estimate is you take all the tariffs together, and it's about a kind of a net effect of about $200 to $300 billion of increased revenue at the expense in kind of the worst way, the least efficient way that hits the poorest the hardest, and then also that like is kind of economically inefficient because it kind of goes against people using their dollar in the way that they want to use their dollar.
Yes, correct.
Next president's saddled with this because if we take them away, we've just made the deficit situation about $2.5 trillion, maybe $3 trillion worse. But at the same time, like if you leave them in place, everyone understands that this is bad for growth. It's bad for innovation. It's kind of bad for equity. The economy now it's not bad. It's not good. The way that I would frame it is the economy is susceptible to shocks, right? Like the unemployment rate
like wild oil prices.
Yeah, for instance,
the
right?
shocks he's giving us.
So that's exactly right. So like, the unemployment rate is a good rate. The problem is it's been creeping up and up and up and up and up and up, right? The employment level is a good level, but the problem is that it's not growing fast enough. That's right. So the economy is fine, but it is teetering insofar as like we believe that it is susceptible to problems, and this is where the tariffs are really problematic. It's a major shock to the system. It's where the deportations are really problematic. It's a horrendous shock to the system on top of kind of the moral problem with that, and it's where the oil prices, right? The oil prices, back in the 70s was one of the major shocks here, and it all comes back to the lack of planning with the president.
And one more, the potential of an AI bubble. So all of this is frightening.
Yeah, sure, definitely. The bubble thing is very, 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 very worrisome, and it's yet another thing where the president is actually, jumping right in, right? Like AI. Anyway, AI is obviously a very complicated thing, but the president is jumping in, and it's where he's just doing whoever's going to pay him, and he's not interested in kind of smart regulations around it.
On the contrary, they're trying to put one of these companies out of business because they didn't want to play. So Anthropic, they want them out of business.
That's one of that's one of the most quintessential Trump things, right? Where he rewards the businesses that will bribe him and do whatever he wants, and he attacks the businesses that won't. Anthropic has a lot of problems, but I think their red lines were not early enough in the process. But the idea of the United States government trying to sink a company because it wouldn't do like Skynet killbots, and because it wouldn't do like Batman, like Batman the Dark Knight style, mass surveillance, that was enough for them to say, okay, we're going to kill you forever. Yeah,
this is who they are. I mean, Brendan Carr, the guy who runs the Federal Communications Commission, has threatened, public broadcasters if they don't salute the president every morning, with the Star-Spangled Banner and talk about the great patriotic war we're fighting. And he says, okay, well, you know what? Maybe we'll pull your broadcast license. They literally are running a mobster government. Right. In the short time we have left, I want to ask you a complicated question. Democrats are starting to think about what a new tax system might look like. And I do not want to talk about any of the proposals that are out there now, because it's like the beginning of a conversation. But I'd like your thoughts about the principles that legislators should aim for if and when Democrats get control, to have a fairer, a system that begins to address this enormous wealth imbalance, that begins to address the stability of government revenues, and is good for the economy.
Yeah, it's an awesome question. A couple different things. I think we need to go after tax. We need to go after the ways in which the richest legally are not paying. Right. We have this big problem where we are undertaxing capital. You and I get paid get paid for our wages, and that is taxed on the income side and the payroll side. But a lot of what the rich people do is they get their money from the fact that they already have money, and that's taxed at a much lower rate. And they sometimes reclassify their income in kind of these special ways. So when I was working in the Biden administration, we put our heads together and we came up with as many different ways as we thought were kind of smart in going after making sure that we tax capital like we tax ordinary income. So that's got to be one of the most quintessential things. You cannot go after their money if you are not serious about taxing capital. So that's one of the most quintessential things. Like, we need to find a way to tax the rich more, and we need to find a way to kind of go after all both their avoidance and their evasion, right? So that's both funding that's both funding the IRS better and also going after the specific ways that they avoid and evade. Number two, and I think this is the other thing, is that we need to ask ourselves what we want society to look like, what we think the government's role is. And sometimes taxes are to fix very specific societal problems, right? If we have, if we have like way too much wealth at the top, and if we're trying to disincentivize specific things, sometimes taxes serve that purpose. But the rest of taxes are to fund society, right? Like, we don't tax people when we're taxing people for Social Security and Medicare, we aren't doing that out of spite or anger. We aren't doing that to punish them. We're doing it because we believe everyone should pay in and everyone then should benefit. And so we need to basically ask ourselves what we think the purpose of taxation is, and then what we think we're trying to fund with it. What do we want to do, right? That we are in the midst of a debate about what we want society to look like, what we think the government ought to provide, where it should be involved, where it shouldn't be involved. And in my strong opinion, we need, the tax code needs to reflect that. It ought to be a reflection of what we are trying to do with our society.
Yeah, I've heard ideas. I mean, it goes back to W talking about an ownership society. Is there somebody floating a plan where the government owns a piece of every corporation in America, and that somehow the public then benefits from the growth and value of private companies?
Yeah, I mean, there are a bunch of different ways that you could do that. You can do it in the direct, kind of the Nordic style, sometimes have direct ownership. But conceptually, some of the
it's a little bit what we used to call communist, but Donald Trump's already done it with some companies.
Well, and I was. That's true. He has taken a direct stake in some things. I guess what I was also going to say is that conceptually, we think that capital taxes are doing that. To the extent that everyone's getting richer and to the extent that there is a massive buildup in capital, we are then kind of taxing those gains, right? That is conceptually doing the same sort of thing where we say, you've won and we're going to take this and we're going to make sure that everyone gets to benefit from that. There are ways to do it kind of either way that achieves the same purpose of, we want a society where if we're all winning, then if we're winning, then we all should benefit from it. We want a society where instead of having just the few getting the benefit and reap the rewards from society winning, where we should all get that.
Well, I thank you for that. And I know just that there are Democrats beginning to sort of float ideas. I don't think anybody's where we ought to be yet. But do you know about, are a lot of people working on this and thinking about it? And will we be ready, should we actually gain back control, to take steps that we need to make our economy work for everyone?
We're definitely lots of people are putting thoughts into. A lot of my colleagues, are doing stuff on the tax side, on utilities, on housing. Everyone's kind of putting that in. Finance committee, right? Like Ron Wyden had a proposal on mark to market, which is one attempt at doing capital. I would say lots and lots and lots of smart people are doing great thinking around this. Step number one, we have to come up with the great ideas. But step number two, we need to make sure that we're willing and ready to do it. I think, when we were trying to do Build Back Better, which died, and instead we got the Inflation Reduction Act, which itself then kind of changed from its initial iteration of what we thought we were going to do. obviously a lot of blame goes to, Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin, but they were kind of useful scapegoats for us to not really think about and address some of the internal problems we had among the rest of the caucus for some of the revenue raisers we wanted to go for. I'll just tell you, I was working at the White House at the time. There were a lot of vigorous debates, and there was a lot more problem than just appeared under the hood when we were first playing with Build Back Better. We had a lot of problems in the House. We had a lot of problems in the Senate. Obviously, it did pass the House, but I can tell you it passed the House because they knew it was going to change. A lot of work is being done, but so number one, we have to come up with the great ideas. But number two, we need to make the case. We need to make the affirmative case. And I would just say on taxation, people don't support taxes if they don't believe in what they're for. And so we also need to be making the direct argument about how and why government can be helpful. There are lots of ways in which government can be actively not helpful, like, for instance, what we're doing in Iran. But there are ways in which the government can be directly helpful. We lift 30 million people out of poverty every single year, and we can and do more.
We can, indeed. We can make it possible for people to have the lives they should have if they work hard in this country. Absolutely. And when you're talking about things the government shouldn't do, I just parenthetically, you and I don't have time to talk about this, but a part of the government is shut down right now because Democrats will not fund what is going on right now in the
That's
government.
Right. That's right.
Bobby, thank you so much. I mean, we're out of time, but I really appreciate it every time we get a chance to talk.
Edwin, the pleasure is always mine.
Would you just tell people before you go if they want to follow your work and learn more where they can go?
Sure. So I work for the Center for American Progress. You can read, if you just search Bobby Kogan, Center for American Progress, you'll find my bio. You can read the papers I put out. I also post on Blue Sky at BBKOGAN, BBKOGAN at the end Blue Sky. And that's where I say all the things that I should or shouldn't say.
Thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thanks, Edwin. You too.
Bye. Bye. All right, folks, we'll take a quick break in your calls when we come back.
Welcome back to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
All right, everybody, time to call in 773-763-9278. Jim, kick us off.
Hi, Edwin. Let's start with 93% of the people in Israel are all for this genocide in Palestine. They're all for murdering people in Lebanon, and they're insane for killing as many people as they can in Iran. And all I can say is I remember 50 years ago, I was having lunch with some priests. I picked them up at the airport. We had lunch, and I had another friend, the Irish priest. And anyway, we were sitting there, and they were flabbergasted by the way the Palestinians were treated. They couldn't believe it. They were taken off buses. They were treated like they were second-class citizens. And it just it reminds me of Northern Ireland in the late 60s. The Irish probably couldn't take it anymore. They had to live they were sequestered to live in certain places. They couldn't vote. They couldn't hold a job if they were Irish Catholics. And my point is, Netanyahu, isn't he busted for stealing? How much did he steal? He's under indictment for years, isn't he? Trump keeps pleading for a pardon for the guy. I mean, these are two villains in history that are going to be just renowned. And I've heard people from the UN saying that this can lead to World War III. And not only that, but I don't think Netanyahu was threatened with an atomic bomb. I think Golda Meir in '73 threatened an atomic bomb. My point is, why does one Homo sapien think that they could rule another Homo sapien? Can you answer me that? As I walk this earth, nobody's going to tell me where to go, when to go, and how to do this, how to do that. Nobody is. It's only going to build tremendous resentment. And think of this: 4 out of 6 Hamas fighters, their parents have been killed by the Israelis. So where do you think they're going to go? I mean, come on. I mean, let's get that. I thought that. What about? Isn't that one of the commandments that Moses got? Was thou shalt not kill? That one wasn't that paramount?
I think the slaughter in Gaza is unconscionable. I've not seen any polling that says what you just said.
No, they said it last night. Last night at Democracy Now!, 93%. They had a reporter from Israel. He's a novelist there. 93. He can't believe it. He calls it the insanity of Israel. That's exactly the way he phrased it. He can't believe that 93% of the people would be all for it. But I mean, this is going to lead to just an absolute catastrophe. Not only if it doesn't go to World War III, the economy will be so wrecked around the world by this thing. By the time it's over with, I mean, think about it. We're all dependent on the dinosaur fuel for what, 200 years, 150 years, and what are we supposed to do? The whole world will be. They threw the ambassador, Spain threw the ambassador from Israel out of the place yesterday. I mean, they can't take this anymore. I mean, you're killing.
Well, I hear you.
Yeah.
I want to be clear about a couple things. What's going on in the Middle East? The Israelis bear responsibility for the slaughter in Gaza. The Hamas bears the responsibility for October 7th.
But they got Hamas. They're Hamas because these people were killed, and that's why they're going to have resentment toward Israel.
And we had a ceasefire with Israel and Hezbollah, and then Hezbollah lobbed missiles in. There's a whole lot of weird stuff going on that's terrible and deadly. But the point for me is that I want to care about the United States. The United States is not, we should not be doing stuff because Bibi Netanyahu says we should do stuff. The Americans, we are the biggest, most, as the president likes to remind us, the biggest, most powerful country in the world should not be the tail behind some other dog, you know, we are responsible for the people we're killing all over the world. We are responsible, and the camp.
But Edwin, you know the history of Iran. We dumped the Democratic elected government there with the CIA to put in the Shah.
And we gave them their first nuclear reactor. We gave them the reactor and trained their scientists.
But I mean, but we kept the Shah, and he had the most secret police. He was 10 times worse than this Khomeini. 10 times worse. He tortured his people and everything else. The point is, you cannot treat one Homo sapien treat another Homo sapiens shabbily without resentment. Anyway,
totally correct.
Thanks,
absolutely, 100%, Jim. I mean, if we would just treat people better, we would.
Yes.
Yes. Amen. Amen.
Yes. Thanks, Edwin.
Thank you, Dave.
Hey, Edwin. To tag on it, what about those Israeli soldiers that got away with raping a Palestinian woman? They got off in the court over there. They didn't get no charges against them.
It was a man, and the case is complicated because a very senior Israeli officer responsible for looking into wrongdoing among troops thought the case was not going to be prosecuted. So she leaked the videos of this thing. And because they were leaked, it was a technicality that got them off. It's a terrible story. And she lost her job, right?
Wow.
So she thought she was pushing to doing something that would force a prosecution. It ended up ruining a prosecution. And this was it's now a few years since the event. This was pre the Gaza war. And it was a prisoner in a prison. It was a man. And these soldiers on video sure looked like they were abusing this soldier and abusing this prisoner. And the prisoner had terrible wounds from their attack, including, a knife in the rear end. I mean, just awful stuff.
Yeah. Anywho, I just want to tag that on. But hey, remember back just a couple of years ago, the MAGAs blamed President Biden for that Abbey Gate incident in Afghanistan during that chaotic ending there, where 13 service members.
Yep.
had gotten killed while with this unnecessary war with Iran. Trump currently is responsible for 13 service members' deaths for this, for him doing the bidding of Bibi in Israel there. Actually, 14 if you include that Army National Guard Major, Surfley Davies, who died
Well,
of...
and Dave, and remember what the Republicans did about an embassy that was overrun in Benghazi in Libya. And in fact, now our embassies have been hit in several countries by Iranian missiles, and we now know that we didn't properly prepare. I mean, we lost a whole bunch of refueling planes that were blown up on the runway because we didn't protect them. And soldiers have told us, so this irresponsible, reckless crowd has caused enormous damage to us.
Right. Well, back at that Abbey Gate thing, even he had them other gates closed off.
Yep.
So and they anyway, but hey, and then lastly, so you can get others. Those drones and stuff that the Iranians got. Ironically, they got from us in a sense when remember when in 2011 when we had that RQ-170 UAV that went down in Iran.
Yes.
That time, and they reverse engineered it, and that's where them Shaheed and that they got.
Oh, you think that's right? That's interesting. That's interesting.
That's based off of that, and
that's very
and of course,
interesting.
Yeah, no, I just thought digging up, remembering that stuff, and because they tried to say, well, it was shot down, it crashed, and there was a picture of the thing, and it looked pristine. And to me, I kind of thought at first it was a Trojan horse, that they okay, and then we'd start picking up some intel with some kind of a bugs in it. But I was reading that. Wow. That's where they've gotten their design stuff from.
Yeah, it's interesting, Dave. Really interesting.
All right. Well, listen. Let me get off. You got others waiting. So
appreciate it. Have a good weekend.
All right. Have a good week, Edwin.
All right, Paul. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Edwin. Well, I could join Jim in his outrage and Dave as well, but they've made their point, so I'll move on. And your guest was. Your last guest was we talked about what can we do, and it struck me a couple of weeks ago. I was teaching about a case that you probably know in the Supreme Court called McCulloch v. Maryland, and it's about the Second National Bank, establishment of the Second National Bank of the United States. And I was reading what the court had said that why the state of Maryland could not tax the Second National Bank of the United States. The court said the power to tax is the power to eliminate. And for some reason, it struck me right then and there. Then let's eliminate these. Let's eliminate these GD billionaires, the morbidly rich. We've allowed this to happen. And what we are seeing, everything we're talking about is because this is what happens when the morbidly rich get to run the government. Every bit of it. And the Epstein files are the morbidly rich files. And it's worldwide. The morbidly rich have gotten away because they can outrun justice with their money. They're never held accountable. And I think, Madison kind of warned about this kind of thing in Federalist 10, and that they become a competitive force against the government. And they've now become, we have enough billionaires that essentially, therefore, their financial force is enough to counteract and compete with our government.
So you're the right person for me to ask this. So we have two conflicting principles in our founding. We have the Declaration of Independence, which sings about equality. And we have a Constitution which argues about property rights. And they aren't the same thing. They just aren't. And we fought a civil war in order to push some of the Declaration of Independence into the Constitution, right? And just because after all, you had the phenomenally wealthy slave power, effectively in the same position as as a handful of the wealthiest interests today, of taking control of the government and effectively saying, you know what, we're going to extend the slave owning to the rest of the continent as we bring other
Mhm.
states in. And the free state people said, oh, no, 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 no. And we ended up in a civil war over that. And that leveraged back in something. But this balance we keep getting, we keep having to redress it, and then corporate interests grew very powerful again in the Gilded Age, and we had the
Yeah.
Progressive Age that pared them back, and they grew again in the 1920s, and then the Depression. Well, they committed suicide by leading to a depression of vast horror for America, and FDR built back a country. FDR and the Democrats then built back a country that had again more levers of social welfare built into it. And starting in the 1980s, we dismantled that and we're back where we were.
Yeah. So if the Civil War solved anything, or, that was the time when there was a paradigm shift, because the Constitution doesn't talk about freedom and liberty. I mean, the preamble says that the sixth clause says to preserve sorry, I don't have it in front of me, but the blessings of liberty.
Yep.
To ourselves. Okay.
For your posterity. Yep. For you and your posterity. Yep.
That's the goal. The preamble is the goal, and this is I was teaching this just a couple of weeks ago too. The preamble is a goal statement. The rest of the Constitution are the objectives. This is how we're going to do it. So the Constitution isn't about freedom and liberty necessarily. It doesn't say that, but it can be taken that way. The Civil War was the paradigm shift.
Yeah.
So pre-Civil War was about exercising the powers for the rich, and the powers of government for the rich, essentially. And the Civil War was the paradigm shift, and we shift back and forth between those two from time to time. Like when you go to the eye doctor and he says 1 or 2, 1 or 2, and he keeps shifting, and you go, which one is better?
Yep.
That's kind of what we do.
We're out of balance right now, for sure.
Yeah, and our focus, that's what the refraction is, what the ophthalmologist is doing. 1 or 2. Which one looks clearer to you? And that's where we get, and because the conservative movement over the last, maybe since World War II, starting in the 50s, I guess, some people say since the Brown versus Board decision, they keep trying to tell us that this country was founded on low taxes. No, it wasn't. It was founded on equal representation, taxation with equal representation. It wasn't founded on low tax, but that's what that's twisted into saying, is it's founded on low taxes, and that the American dream is amassing as much money as you possibly can. No, it's not. It's the American dream is about the American dream is self-determination. You determine what, and if you want to make a lot of money, that's fine.
You have
that
the agency to determine your own future. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, you should. And we got to get back there. Hey, Paul, I'm going to move on. I got 2 more callers I want to squeeze in before we end. Thank you.
Okay.
Greg and Beth, we're going to try and get you both in. Greg, that means you got about a minute and a half.
Okay. First thing I got to say is Americans should stop funding AIPAC. Second thing, American Jews should cancel their dual citizenship with Israel, and this in solidarity with the people in Ukraine. The next thing I would recommend is that we create a replica of Little Boy 2 and Fat Man, and we strap a likeness of Big Balls to Little Boy 2 and drop it on Tel Aviv, and then we strap William Barr onto Fat Man 2 and drop it on Jerusalem. Then we should desupply the Israeli Iron Dome and tell the people of Israel to have faith in their God instead. Okay.
Stop.
That's it. No, I'm hanging up because I know you don't like my things, but you gave me a minute, so that's it.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Beth.
I'm so tired of all the anti-Semitism, I got to tell you, Edwin. And what people don't understand is how did this current thing start with Israel and Gaza? They never mention what happened to all those people on October 7th. To them, that's not even part of the scenery. They just say that Israel came in and bombed Gaza for no reason whatsoever. And I'm sorry, that just irritates me to no end.
I appreciate that, Beth. I think nobody has said October 7th was a good idea. I think the anger at Israel, and it's now spilled over into anger at Jews, very dangerously.
Oh, absolutely.
Very dangerously. Um, um, but leaders didn't take this into account in their planning, and the slaughter in Gaza caught people's hearts. It was too much. It was too big of a response. That's what Americans think, and they think it widely on the right and on the left to the horror of October 7th. And Americans also they just want, like, what I thought Israelis wanted, and I think they still do, which is peace with their neighbors. But a two-state solution has been on offer for a long time,
Absolutely.
And while the Palestinians have missed every opportunity to create one, Bibi has not missed any opportunity to sabotage one, and that has left a position where I mean, it's a reality that Americans are deeply angry with Israel. I mean, even Americans who support Israel are deeply angry with it, and terrifyingly for America's Jews, that anger has spread to be just plain old anti-Semitism all over the place. And by the way, there are a lot of really good people who on both sides of this, but have retreated to their most angry corners.
I don't know. It irks me every day when I hear this.
Heartbreaking.
It really is. The whole thing is heartbreaking, and I'm just, I don't know. It's frightening, and
I hear you. We need to get peace in that part of the world in order to start healing. Right?
Absolutely.
And you know, dropping, we cannot start to heal.
I think, though, that some of these people that are so anti-Israel have no idea how many non-Jews live peacefully in Israel. I really think that they believe that only Jews live there.
Well, and there's ignorance all the way around. I mean, I
guess
think that,
so.
You know, a lot of people don't know what it's like living in Ramallah, for instance. So we need peace, and with that, we need to make a very, very big effort to get to know each other. Yep.
Absolutely. I would agree with you on that. Thank you so much, Edwin. Have a great weekend. Bye.
All right, everybody. I appreciate all your calls and all the frustration and anger everybody's feeling. Let us aim for better angels and aim to get some peace in the world, which I think means that we have to get the crowd in Washington out the door as soon as possible. Talk to you next week.